5 years after being estranged from my father, he recently reached out to me, which made me reflect on whether I did the right thing when we last parted ways. I was 26, just out of college, when my dad suddenly kicked me out of the house. This happened after my stepmother and stepsister accused me of stealing my stepsister's college savings. This event was the final straw in a long period of tension that began when my dad remarried. My parents had divorced when I was 7, and by the time I was 15, my dad started dating Ellie, who later became my stepmother. Ellie was a widow with a daughter, Sophia, who was 4 years younger than me. From the first time we met, I felt that Ellie and Sophia didn't really want to accept me. Over time, that feeling only grew. When I moved away for college, coming home became uncomfortable, as Ellie and Sophia's cold behavior toward me was obvious. My father, however, didn't see it and believed they had no hard feelings toward me, which only created a bigger gap between us. After graduating, I moved back home to save money for my own place. I wanted to talk to my dad about the tension I was feeling, but he brushed off my concerns, convinced that Ellie and Sophia liked me. It wasn't long before things got worse. One day, after I had been house hunting to get away from the negative atmosphere at home, I came back to a tense situation. My father, visibly upset, immediately told me to leave, accusing me of stealing Sophia's college fund. Ellie backed him up, falsely claiming that I had misused a financial account meant for emergencies. I was shocked and hurt by the accusations, especially because my dad believed them without hearing my side of the story. With no choice, I left, cutting off ties with him. Now, after years of silence, my father's sudden attempt to reconnect has brought back all these painful memories. It's made me wonder if I could have handled the situation differently, but I still don't understand why Ellie accused me of taking money meant for her daughter. Ellie claimed that I had spent a lot of money on expensive brands, using the cash set aside for her daughter to fund a shopping spree. This was a complete lie, but she managed to convince my father by hiding those purchased items in my room. When my father found the stash under my bed, he believed her accusations. Even though I insisted we check with the bank to clear things up, my father refused. Already convinced that I was guilty, he called me a thief, and despite all my efforts to prove I was innocent, he wouldn't listen. Heartbroken, I moved out, lost contact with him, and faced financial struggles for a while. Eventually, I got back on my feet, built a stable life, and even planned to buy a house. For 5 years, I stayed away from my father's side of the family. During that time, my mother stood by me, having also cut ties with my dad because of how he treated me. Then, unexpectedly, my father showed up at my new home, asking for forgiveness. He had finally learned the truth. Ellie had made up the entire story to cover up her own misuse of the money meant for her daughter's college fund. She had bought luxury items for herself and Sophia, then framed me to make my dad cover the expenses, fearing he would see her as a gold digger. After a recent argument with her parents, they revealed everything to my father, exposing Ellie's manipulation. Now understanding the full extent of her lies, my father was asking for a chance to make things right. It turned out that Ellie had been using me as part of her plan to secure her financial future without revealing her own extravagant spending. My father also told me that he had filed for divorce from Ellie with the help of his old lawyer a few weeks ago, and he now wanted to repair our relationship. During our conversation, he mentioned that one of my friend's fathers was a well-respected divorce attorney. My dad hoped I would help him connect with this attorney and maybe get a reduced fee since Ellie and her lawyer had filed a very unfair divorce petition. He seemed to think that just apologizing would make everything fine, and then I would help him as if nothing had happened between us. His audacity left me speechless. I couldn't help but laugh before firmly closing the door on him. The idea that after everything, he would expect me to assist him was ridiculous. If he needed a lawyer, he should contact one himself and pay like everyone else. His current lawyer's hesitation to handle the messy divorce because of complications and retirement was not my problem. After I shut the door on my father, I warned him to leave or I'd call the police. I thought that was the end of it, but then my mother called. To my surprise, she criticized my decision not to help him. She argued that everyone makes mistakes, even my father, and it wasn't fair to hold him to a higher standard just because he was my dad. While I understood her point that people make mistakes, my issue went deeper than that. It was about his choice to trust Ellie over me, his own daughter, and the hurtful things he had said when he kicked me out of the house. Even after all that, he didn't just come to apologize, he also came because he wanted my help. I couldn't help but feel that if he hadn't needed something, I wouldn't have heard from him at all. It took him 5 years to admit his mistake, and now he wanted to make amends, but only because he needed a favor. I tried to explain this to my mother, that my hesitation wasn't about holding on to past mistakes but about the pain caused by him prioritizing Ellie over me. However, my mother insisted that his delayed apology should still count for something and urged me to forgive him and be the bigger person. While I'm close to my friend and could probably talk to him about his father taking on my dad's case, I felt torn. Reconnecting under these circumstances felt emotionally draining, and I wasn't sure I could just set aside the past, especially with the expectation to help him. My mother and I ended up in a heated argument about whether I should help my father get a discount from a top divorce lawyer. Good lawyers are expensive, and I wasn't sure I could even convince anyone to lower their fees. My mother didn't see my perspective, and I couldn't understand hers, which seemed completely illogical to me. The argument left us both frustrated and not speaking to each other. It made me question my decisions and wonder if maybe I was wrong. After reflecting on the situation, I still felt unsure if refusing to help my father was the right decision, but my mother's reaction made me doubt myself. After thinking it over and hearing advice from others, I've decided to distance myself from both of my parents. It's clear to me that I don't owe my father anything, especially since his apology came only after he realized the truth, suggesting he wouldn't have reached out if he didn't need help. As for my mother, I'm confused by her sudden support for my father after years of not speaking to him. During our last conversation, she mentioned that my father had contacted her, tearfully trying to reconnect, something very out of character for him, since he rarely shows his emotions. After hearing my father's tearful plea, my mother agreed to listen to him and learned about his attempt to apologize to me. However, she claimed they hadn't been in contact for the past 5 years, which I found hard to believe. This made me realize that my mother doesn't understand me as well as I thought. If she truly knew me, she wouldn't have expected me to forgive my father so easily. For now, I've decided to distance myself from both my parents. It's been easy to avoid my father since I've been doing it for years, but creating space from my mother will be much harder. She's been my main family connection, and the thought of losing that bond is painful. I decided to give her a week to reflect and possibly apologize for her reaction. If she doesn't, I'll have to accept that my relationship with her may also be a casualty of this family conflict. It's a tough decision, but I need to protect my emotional well-being and move forward, with or without their understanding. Before the week ended, my mother reached out, not with an apology, but with a request to visit and talk things through in person, hoping for reconciliation. I agreed. When she arrived, she began by admitting she might not have fully tried to understand my perspective during our last conversation. Encouraged, I shared my feelings again, hoping it would lead to her apology so we could move forward. However, instead of apologizing, she suggested I have the same conversation with my father. She believed that if I calmly explained my side to him, it might help heal things between us. She reminded me that despite his mistakes in believing I had taken Ellie's money, my father had still protected me from legal consequences, which in her view showed that he cared. She pressed me to offer him an explanation, saying that I was raised to be kind and understanding. I felt disheartened. I told her that she didn't know me as well as she thought. I didn't feel any obligation to forgive or explain anything to my father after all he had done. I was also hurt that she hadn't apologized for her own role in this situation and told her I would only be willing to talk again if she was ready to give a genuine apology. As the conversation grew more tense, she became visibly nervous and admitted that she couldn't leave without trying to fulfill a promise she made to my father, to convince me to speak to him. She pleaded with me, saying that family should forgive one another and that it would be tragic to live without that connection. I dismissed this as empty words and asked her to leave, frustrated that her visit seemed more about her promise to my father than about repairing our relationship. In that moment, she finally showed some regret, realizing that her approach could cause her to lose me. However, her apology felt tied to her loyalty to my father, rather than a sincere understanding of my feelings. This revelation only added to the complexity of the situation. leaving me to navigate the turbulent family dynamics while trying to protect my emotional health. I felt deeply betrayed by both of my parents, yet a part of me wondered if I should forgive them simply because they were my parents. They had done many good things in the past, and perhaps that should count for something. However, when my mother used this reasoning to justify her actions, it seemed absurd to me. I confronted her about making promises to my father that she might not be able to keep, stressing that it wasn't my job to help her fulfill those commitments. The conversation escalated when she admitted that my father was waiting outside in the car, hoping to be invited in. That was the final straw. I had made it clear that I didn't want to see him, yet she had disregarded my wishes, thinking she could convince me otherwise. My frustration turned into anger, and I couldn't hold back. I yelled at her, telling her she was a terrible mother and that I was done with her. Despite her tears and apologies, I had made up my mind. The argument dragged on for about 15 minutes before she finally left, and as she did, I warned her that if either she or my father returned, I would call the police. After she left, I even considered speaking to a lawyer about getting a protective order against them. Then, out of nowhere, another unexpected event occurred. I was enjoying a day off at home, planning a quiet day, when Ellie and her daughter Sophia showed up at my doorstep. At first, I was ready to send them away immediately, and I even started dialing the police. But Ellie quickly interjected, saying she wasn't there to cause trouble but to reveal some truths about my father and explain why my mother had suddenly sided with him after years of silence. Her presence was as unpleasant as ever, and I had no desire to hear her out. But something she said about my mother caught my attention, and I reluctantly decided to listen, though I kept her outside and refused to let her in. Ellie revealed that a few weeks ago, her parents had told my father some critical information about the incident from 5 years ago, which had triggered a series of revelations and confrontations. This twist was surprising. I never expected Ellie, of all people, to come forward with information that could potentially explain the recent tensions and strange alliances in my family. Her news complicated my understanding of the family dynamics. Ellie explained that she had stopped sending money to her parents because my father was no longer giving her the financial support she wanted. She had grown greedy, and when the money started to dry up, she began investigating. That's when she uncovered a shocking secret. My father was having an affair with my mother. Ellie suspected he had been hiding money, possibly preparing to leave her. Determined not to be left empty-handed, Ellie had decided to stay with him for now, planning to file for divorce on her own terms eventually.
People are divided into early lark and night owls. Hannah was unequivocally an owl, but life, however, moulded her into a lark, forcing her to rise at dawn for school, university, and work. Her arch nemesis was the alarm clock. It rang like a demon, the one thing she'd swat without remorse. At night, she read, thought, and worked better. In the mornings, she even lacked the energy to listen or respond to her husband. He often got angry at her inattention, while Hannah also got angry because she had asked him not to pester her in the morning. However, by the time she reached work, she'd be awake and functional. I'm lucky to have a job I love, she thought. If I had to drag myself to a job I hated every morning, I'd have no chance to be happy. Her friend Chelsea often complained, I despise my job. Hannah, imagine every morning my colleagues gather and the first thing they do is judge each other's outfits. Heaven forbid someone stands out. They'd be ostracized. Then they start whining about being overworked and try to take it out on each other. I try not to get involved, so all the work gets dumped on me. It's easier to do everyone's job than to fight with these harpies. Didn't you want to change jobs? Hannah asked. I did, but remember when I was choosing my profession? I had no desire at all. I went where my mum told me to go. Turns out finance and accounting weren't my thing. While Chelsea's mother had pushed her into her profession, Hannah had taken the path of least resistance. Medical school, technical school, and law were immediately ruled out due to high competition. The pedagogical college remained, and the faculty choice was clear. Literature was the only school subject Hannah adored. She studied with ease and interest, believing she'd made the right choice. However, after 6 months of teaching, doubts crept in. It turned out that children in large numbers irritated her. Her intention to guide students on the right path through classics fell on deaf ears. They didn't read at all. Sowing wisdom and virtue seemed futile. She was left to teach them grammar rules monotonously and prepare them for exams. One day, furious at herself for this choice and for not trying to change anything, Hannah decided to flee the school for any other opportunity. The chance came as soon as Hannah resolved to change her life. It seemed fate had been waiting behind the door, opening it the moment Hannah slammed the previous one shut. Summer began. The school year ended, and Hannah vowed to herself, "I won't return to school in August." She repeated this like a mantra, building her determination. "I have proper speech, good diction, and a pleasant timbre. Where could I use all this?" she thought to herself. And finally, the woman decided these skills could be useful in radio. She realized quick reactions and improvisation were also necessary, but hoped these could be learned. So, one day, Hannah marched into the local TV and radio company and declared, "I am eager to work for you." They weren't surprised. Apparently such aspiring stars often showed up. They took her to the studio, had her read a text, recorded it, and sat her in a corner to await the verdict. Hannah sat trembling with excitement. Reading into a microphone is terrifying. Why did I think I could do this? I've embarrassed myself. Stuttering, stumbling, they won't take me. Suddenly a large man burst into the studio. Hannah was stunned. It was a local celebrity, TV star and journalist, Gary Wilson. "Guys, I need your help. I urgently need a female voice. We're short on women. Helen's in the capital for a course. Chloe and Tina are on vacation. We need to air the program and there's no one to voice it. Ben, do you have anyone available?" "Gary, you're acting like a first-time groom. Couldn't you have planned ahead? My girls are all left for the seaside. Natalie's on air, and Anne won't be here for 3 hours." Ben was listening to Hannah's recording, her soft voice filling the studio. Gary was careening around the cramped room, knocking over chairs and microphones. "Careful, you elephant, you'll wreck my studio." "Damn, we're in a bind. Oh, by the way, who's that voice?" "Just recorded her. Not bad, good voice, but she's stiff. No experience at all." "Let me hear." Gary donned the headphones, listening. "Ben, you're too critical. It's not bad at all. Where is she?" "She's sitting over there. Came to apply for a job. Her name's Hannah." Gary wasn't listening anymore. He yanked off the headphones and rushed to Hannah. "Is radio a must? Or would TV work do too? If you don't like it, I'll send you back to radio." He grabbed the stunned Hannah by the hand, dragged her through some corridors, and planted her in a chair in the TV studio. Then he dashed off and returned with sheets of text. "Read this. Then we'll look at the footage. Don't worry, it's not too difficult. And your voice clearly suits the theme." 2 days later, the program was broadcasted. Hannah watched the monitor with surprise, listening to her voice. Somehow it sounded different, changed. She knew it was hers, yet it seemed strange. "Well, beauty, congratulations on your debut. You've done it nicely. Why don't you give up the idea with radio and stay with us?" "I don't have a journalism degree." "That's no surprise. Half of our staff are self-taught, with no specialized education. I'm a geography teacher myself. Among the professionals here, we have 2 directors, cameramen, and a few journalists. Thank God for licensed drivers. Well, I'm going to do a short story. We'll go out, shoot it, and come back. You write your text. I'll write mine, and we'll see what happens. Let's go." And so began Hannah's career on the local TV channel. She was assigned to culture, theatres, concerts, exhibitions, and museums. Once she made a report on a photo exhibition of architectural monuments of the city from an unusual angle. The play of light and shadow transformed old buildings into sunny palaces or haunted castles. This inspired her to create a series of programs about the city's historical places. Hannah's husband, Kurt, was staunchly against his wife's work on television. "Hannah, at school you had a normal schedule, weekends and vacation all summer. And now what? You've just started working, and you're hardly ever home. I don't like it. What do you want, fame? A stardom on a provincial channel, talking about premieres at the same provincial theatre? Will they pay you extra for tickets sold? Or are you going to distribute them yourself, so people can see that your advertising is useful?" Hannah usually went along with her husband. He was a smart adult who knew better, but this time she stood up for her choice. "No, I'm not going back to school. I like the editorial office. It's interesting. For once I'm happy going to work." "Is your job more important to you than your husband?" "I haven't dug that deep, but if there are ultimatums, I'll think about it. Kurt, we've been together for 6 years. Youthful maximalism is over. It's time to compromise." Finally, Hannah's inner night owl was happy. No one forced her to sleep at night and stand with sleepy eyes in front of a pack of snide teenagers in the morning. One Friday, Chelsea called. "Hannah, are you at work? Only you can save me. I'll be right there." It turned out that Chelsea was in trouble. She had slowed down at a crosswalk, and a car crashed into her from behind. Now her car was being repaired. "Just imagine, this jerk said, 'I didn't know you'd slow down.'" "Really? It's a crosswalk. People are walking here." Chelsea was so angry that sparks were flying from her eyes. And he was sarcastic about a woman driving like a... You know what I mean. Who does he think he is? Well, never mind. That's not why I came. "Hannah, can you please lend me your car? I have to go to the summer cottage tomorrow. I ordered furniture, and movers are coming for delivery. Besides, as I recall, your Kurt is leaving on a business trip, so you can drive his car, and I'll take you home today. Please, please," Chelsea asked, and folded her hands in a pleading gesture. "Sure, take it," Hannah said with a smile. She couldn't refuse her best friend. Kurt was going on a business trip to Investment Forum. It was good to be a promising manager at an investment company. Some meetings were sometimes held in Dubai. Hannah wanted to go to Dubai too. She had flown with Kurt once, but this time he hadn't invited her. Probably the firm was in economy mode, flying without wives. Although, if they were saving money, they could avoid flying altogether. However, that wasn't her concern. "Why are you flying on Saturday when the conference starts on Monday?" "Friends from my college will be there, so we decided to fly in 2 days early, to meet up and socialize. We won't have time later. Listen, why don't I call a cab? The flight is too early for you, dear." "No, I'll take you. Oh, Kurt, I forgot to tell you. I'll be driving your car for a while. I lent mine to Chelsea for the weekend." The couple talked some more. Hannah helped her husband pack his suitcase, and everyone went to bed. The flight was really early in the morning. The morning was as gloomy and dreary as always. Kurt was driving the car to the airport, with Hannah dozing in the passenger seat. Kurt turned on the music, looking cheerful and satisfied. Where does a person get so much energy in the morning? Although if she were flying to Dubai, she would also sparkle with joy and optimism. Hannah was puzzled. She saw Kurt off to the departure zone, kissed him, waved, took a cup of coffee from the machine and went to the parking lot. It's sad, somehow. Not because my husband is leaving, but because I am not worried about it. Before, I would have sobbed for half a day over such a separation, and now I'm even ashamed to admit I'm relieved he'll be gone for at least a week. Yes, our family life has completely fallen apart, and I don't understand when it went wrong. Hannah sat in the car drinking coffee, contemplating her life with Kurt. Suddenly, she realized sharply and clearly that there was no love left between them anymore. Had there ever been? Who knows? He was smart, mature, 7 years older, reliable. Hannah's mother used to say, "You can't miss such a groom. You have to take him before he's snatched from under your nose." So Hannah didn't miss him. She liked him, seemed to love him, but did she know how to love? Admiration? Hormones? Yes, it was. But was it love? She didn't know. Only now something had broken. It seemed that Chelsea, with her endless romances, was happier than a respectable, prosperous wife. Suddenly Hannah realized she was crying. Nonsense. I'm fine. I've got a husband everyone envies. Let our family life be without sparks and outbursts. But it's reliable and proven. Those relationships with fireworks are on the edge. They flash and pass. But I have something forever, without surprises. Hannah wiped her tears and drove out of the parking lot, heading to her cozy and calm home. Her longing faded away, her mood lifting sharply. Hannah sped along the highway, smiling at the jokes of the morning broadcast hosts from her local TV and radio company. Suddenly, the woman was distracted by a quiet sound, as if a phone was ringing somewhere far away. She looked. Her phone was lying next to her. What's ringing? She drove off the highway and stopped. The sound disappeared. She looked around, checked the back seat, opened the glove compartment. Here's the phone. It's strange that Kurt has two. Probably a work one for communicating with clients. She was about to put it away, reached for the glove compartment, when the phone rang again. Startled, her hand shook, and the phone fell to the floor. Hannah fumbled under the seat, trying to find it, as it kept ringing, with Carla glowing on the screen. Should I answer it? Probably yes. I should tell her that Kurt has flown out. They can call in a week. She pressed the answer button, but didn't have time to say anything. Kurt, are you already on the plane? Mark and I are already in Dubai. The hotel is gorgeous and the sea is clean. Mark, will you talk to Dad? She heard some noise and a child's voice from afar. Honey, the connection is bad. I'll send you the name of the hotel. Kisses, my love. When you land, call me. The phone went silent, and Hannah sat motionless, stunned. What was that? Wrong number? No, the woman called Kurt by name and was waiting for him in Dubai. Hannah still pretended not to understand. No, it can't be. It's crazy. But through the fog in her head, a fierce and firm conviction was growing. You've got it right. Carla is Kurt's mistress, and he has a child with her. Not a casual relationship, but a long-term, one could say, family relationship. How can it be? Years of lies and pretense? Hannah's thoughts weren't forming clearly in her head yet. Everything was too sudden. She imagined returning to an empty apartment. She wouldn't be able to work there. Her mind wasn't on that. She would wander around the rooms, eating herself up and conjuring scenarios, each scarier than the last. No, she shouldn't stay home alone now. There was no point in going to the editorial office. It was a day off, empty. And there were no close friends there to whom she could pour out her heart. Chelsea was her only friend, the one to whom all troubles and misfortunes, snot and tears could go. Chelsea, are you at the cottage? Yes. I'm on my way. Chelsea didn't even ask why. If Hannah, early in the morning, suddenly decided to come to the summer house, then something had happened. Judging by her voice, her soul needed healing, and she needed a shoulder to cry on. She always speaks about work with excitement, so it's personal. That's what's weird. Hannah has an exemplary husband, picture perfect and on the honour roll. To my eyes, he's boring and tedious, but he suits Hannah. It's always amazed me that they've never had a single quarrel in 6 years. Everything they had was dignified and intelligent. Maybe that was it. If they had yelled at each other once, allowed themselves a couple of harsh words, smashed a few plates, it might have been easier. No, nothing could have happened between Hannah and Kurt. It was too unbelievable. Well, what's the use in speculating? She'll come and tell me. When Hannah arrived, Chelsea dragged her friend to the veranda, sat her down on the sofa, and fussed over her like she was dying. Hannah took a devastated look, as if she had seen something but didn't understand what it was. What's wrong with her? Did aliens come and take her Kurt away? It's no big deal. They'll see that the object is of no interest and return him, Chelsea thought to herself. Chelsea, stop jumping around. Sit down. Kurt has a second family, Hannah finally said. Chelsea plopped down on the chair. Now she had a face as if she'd seen an alien. How's that? It's beyond the realm of possibility. Hannah, what do you mean? Did you dream this? I heard his Carla. Hannah said and told everything that had happened that morning. Do you think I misunderstood? Hey, wake up, say something. What the hell? How old did you say the boy is, by his voice? About 4 years old? Do you know what that means? If the boy had been 7 or more, okay, things happen in life. First love, a child, but he didn't marry. Then he met you, married you and started a family with you. But it wasn't like this. All those years you shared him with Carla. What an abomination! What a sensitive and caring man. Not a word or a deed, just to avoid upsetting you. I wonder if Carla's not upset either. Doesn't she know about you? Or does he only keep you safe from news about his second family? He must love you more. Chelsea was full of sarcasm. Chelsea, with her intolerance for lies and inability to pretend, would have torn Kurt apart. She'd call him right now and, without mincing words, tell him exactly what she thought of him. But that's Chelsea. She doesn't keep men for long. To her, even a hint of insincerity is a mortal sin, a reason for breaking up. Chelsea couldn't predict what Hannah would do. Hannah had lived so many years with one man and considered family the main value in life. Hannah cried silently, her face frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. It wasn't anger or despair, but hurt and disappointment. All these years, she'd been proud of a family that didn't exist, and loved a husband who wasn't truly hers. Why did he do this to me? I'd understand if he fell in love, struggled, suffered and left, but to be so sneaky and cold-blooded for years. What are you going to do? I'll get a divorce. Oh, thank God. I was worried you'd start talking about family values, years lived in love, forgiveness and repentance. Divorce is the right decision. It's not scary. It's scary to live and wonder who he's with now. Oh, damn. He's like a sultan with a harem. Hannah, life for you and me is like a striped zebra. Sometimes lucky, sometimes not, said Chelsea with a dreaming smile. I think this zebra is going to trample me. It's not strong enough. It'll break its hooves. You think you're going through a rough patch? Your family life in ruins? Darkness ahead? But I think you're on a lucky streak. New job, bigamist husband will be kicked to the curb. Let's celebrate. Maybe you're right. I've been living, thinking how lucky I am, what a wonderful husband I had. Someone's love might be brighter, but my happiness is stronger. It turned out that I was driving along the black line, not across. When it's black and white, but along, with the stubbornness of a donkey, I'm getting a divorce. You know what it takes to be happy? Living with someone who appreciates you. And if your husband isn't that person, divorce him without regret and get a lover. You've almost done the first part. The second is left. You're lucky to have a friend who's good at that. By evening, the village was filled with the tantalizing aromas of roasted meat and smoked fish. Saturday evening at the village is a special, sacred time. People stop digging, weeding and building, and with a sense of accomplished duty, set tables on verandas, in arbours, or right in the garden under apple and pear trees. The gatherings turn out to be diverse and unpredictable. Some come with friends, Some have relatives staying at their summer houses instead of the owners. It doesn't matter. As Hannah was falling asleep, she thought, should I call Kurt? Answer the phone. If I answer, I'll have to explain myself over the phone. I don't want that. When he arrives, then we'll talk. She mentally rehearsed what she would say, but kept getting nonsense. She couldn't imagine how to talk about such things. For some reason, she felt ashamed, as if it were her fault that her family was falling apart. She was angry that she couldn't find the words to tell her husband about his own deceit. Hannah was awakened by the sun, its rays beating directly on her pillow. Hannah got up, stretched, feeling good and calm at heart. She went out onto the veranda and saw Chelsea talking on the phone. Awake? My neighbour and I are going to the river. Will you come? No, I'll have breakfast and go home. I have to work tomorrow. All right, dear. Luckily for you, you have to go to your loved work, while I have to go to a week's hard labour. Hannah, call me, please. Tell me what's going on. I'm worried. I'll return your car tomorrow. All the week, Hannah was worried, twitchy, couldn't work quietly, and almost didn't sleep. The decision wasn't spontaneous, but thought out. Yet her soul felt scratched by a cat. It's not easy to break an established, quite comfortable life. Will it be possible to build a new one? Kurt called several times. Hannah didn't pick up the phone. She had no idea what to say to him. As if the week weren't bad enough, work was scarce. The city was hosting an international forum, so there was a lot of filming. It was impossible to get into the operator's schedule. Gary persuaded. Hannah, your cultural and historical performances can wait a little. Once this fuss is over, let's return to eternal values. I'll give you 2 cameramen. I give you my word. Meanwhile, be idle a little. So to avoid idleness, Hannah decided to look at a few old buildings, in case ideas would appear. In the old part of the city on the outskirts, on the steep bank of the river, stood the very old manor. It was abandoned, slowly crumbling. When Hannah arrived, she realized why the building wasn't even listed as an architectural monument. There was no monument left. No floor, no ceiling, crumbled stairs, and dilapidated walls. The place was beautiful. High bank, river, forest behind the river, quiet and away from the city, smelling of honey herbs. Hannah had seen the city's development plan. Soon there would be cottages here, and no old walls would remain, as if no one had ever lived here. Suddenly, in the complete silence, Hannah heard a sound. It wasn't clear about the nature of the sound, but she wasn't alone here. Is it a dog whimpering? She listened and went toward the sound. No, not a dog. It sounds like crying. At the far end of the building, where some catacombs began, the crying grew louder. Hannah couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Who's here? Where are you? A strangled scream came from somewhere below. Hannah cautiously walked on the rotten boards piled on the ground. In one place the boards were broken, revealing a hole 2 meters deep. Hannah lay down on the boards and crawled over. At the bottom of the hole sat a boy of about 7 or 8 years old. Hey, can you get up? No, I must have broken my leg. Hannah remembered seeing a makeshift ladder at the entrance, a board with crossbars. I'll be right back. She dragged the ladder, put it in the hole, and climbed down. The boy was filthy, frightened and in pain. He looked at Hannah with pleading eyes. Cling to my neck, tightly. Ready? Come on. Hannah climbed up, clinging to the rungs. Splinters dug into her palms, and she prayed that the old, rotten ladder wouldn't fall apart. She crawled out of the hole, put the boy on the boards, and collapsed beside him, needing to catch her breath. My cell phone's here somewhere. It flew off when I fell. I have to call my dad. Hannah looked around. Yes, here it is. She retrieved the phone. Let's get to the car and call him there. Can you walk? He couldn't walk well. His leg was really hurting. They got to the car and called the boy's father. "Dylan, where are you?" "My name is Hannah, and I'm taking your son to traumatology. Don't be alarmed. He's probably had a cracked bone or a closed fracture. Meet us at the emergency room." At the hospital, they took an X-ray and said it wasn't serious, a non-displaced fracture. They took the boy away to put a cast on it. Hannah sat in the corridor when a man ran down the corridor. "Are you the one who found Dylan?" "Yes, it's me. Sit down, please. They're putting a cast on him. Wait a little while. Since you're his father, there's no need for me to be here, so I have to go." "Where did you find him?" "At the old manor near the river." "Where's that? What was he doing there?" "Ask him, and also ask yourself, why do you leave your child alone? He was climbing through ruins. Something worse could have happened there." Roger was in the office when Dylan's nanny, Vera, called in hysterics, screaming that Dylan was missing. They had been walking in the park when the boy suddenly disappeared. Vera ran around calling for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Roger drove to all the places his son might be, but couldn't find him. When Hannah called, he was writing a statement for the police. At this moment, Dylan was brought out of the treatment room with a plastered leg. Roger rushed to his son, grabbed him in his arms, and held him tightly. Dylan sobbed. "Daddy, don't scold Vera. It's my fault. I ran away deliberately, unnoticed. I thought I'd see the old house and come back. It wasn't Vera's fault." "I know it's not her fault. She's lying at home with high blood pressure now. The doctors are giving her injections. Your broken leg is punishment enough for your exploits. Wait a minute." He put Dylan on the table and hurried after Hannah, who was leaving. "Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't even thank you. It was so hectic. I'm Roger. Here's my business card. I'll be glad to help you someday. Please give me your cell phone number. Don't think I'm... After today's adventures, I can't think at all. My name is Hannah, but I won't give you my phone number. There is no need. Have a lovely day. Get well, and take care of your son better." Tired and dirty, Hannah drove home, only now feeling afraid. What if I hadn't gone to the manor? What would have happened to the boy? It's in the middle of nowhere. I don't think anyone else would have wandered in. He's a good boy, so eager to protect his nanny, and the father is probably not a bad man. At least he loves his son. The week flew by. Today Kurt was coming back. Hannah was ready to meet and talk, but her hands were shaking with excitement. She paced around the apartment, moving things from place to place. She even knocked over a vase of flowers and dropped a cup of coffee. She couldn't calm down. What if he doesn't come? It would be nice if he didn't. If he disappeared forever. Then I'd have no one to explain to. But the key turned in the door. Hannah shuddered as a wave of rage suddenly swept over her. A week of pent-up emotions now covering her. "Oh, you scoundrel, you showed up." She sighed deeply. "Calm down, Hannah, no shouting. Kurt doesn't need to know what's going on in your soul." Kurt came in smiling, with an angelic smile, tired but happy to be home, as he was always after business trips. Only now Hannah looked at him with different eyes. His look seemed insincere. His smile wasn't genuine. The man came over and hugged his wife, demonstrating his joy at being home. "Hannah, I missed you so much." "But I didn't miss you. I was wondering how much longer you're going to hang around like this. I was wondering when you'd decide which shore to dock at." Kurt froze. "Well, let's not drag out the suspense. I know about Carla and Mark. Why have you kept silent for so many years?" "I didn't know how to tell you." "Are you kidding? So, saying the truth is a problem, but living with two families is not a problem at all. Strange logic. Well, did you hope I'd never find out?" "I didn't think it would turn out this way." "How? That you'd cheat from the day we got married? That two families would live in parallel? Or what did you think? I wouldn't find out? Of course you didn't think. You don't know how to think or feel. There's no other way to explain your life." Don't overreact. I love you. What good is that kind of love to me? Do you love Carla too? You know what? You're a terrible husband and a lousy lover, Kurt. I'm divorcing you. I don't care who you live with or where. Kurt paced around the room, clearly not having considered this outcome. What? Divorce? I don't want a divorce. Okay, you've found out, you're upset, but why divorce? Hannah, don't 6 years of marriage count for anything? We lived well. Everything suited you. If you hadn't found out by chance, we would have kept living like that. You're not a stupid woman. Why break everything? I'm not going back to Carla. Let everything stay as it is. Carla doesn't insist. I don't care about your Carla. I insist. When are you coming to get your things? I'll file for divorce myself. I think they'll grant it quickly. There's nothing to divide. No children. Kurt wanted to say something, but didn't dare. His wife's look was too fierce. He left, and Hannah was shaken again. The tension finally released. Everything was sad, with nothing more to wait for. She felt no sorrow for her past love. It had evaporated instantly from disgust. Her heart felt only sadness and bewilderment. The next day, the international event was over, and Gary fulfilled his promise. Hannah had 2 camera operators, filmed a lot of material, and spent all day in the editing room, watching, selecting, and culling. She got terribly tired and decided not to work on the weekend, even at home. She often thought of poor Dylan. How's his leg? Wouldn't it be appropriate to call Roger and ask about his son's health? She twirled a business card in her hands. Wow, a vice president of some joint stock company. He's a tough guy, but he doesn't look after his kid properly. However, it's common to build a career and neglect your family. Finally, the woman decided to call. Roger, this is Hannah. I'm worried about Dylan. Hannah, I'm so glad. Dylan has been driving me crazy. He really wants to see you. I know it seems strange, but please meet him. He can't get over the trauma from the pit. Maybe your presence will calm him down. Please don't refuse. I'll pick you up wherever you say. All right, in an hour. I'll text you the address. Roger's house smelled of freshness, flowers, and pies. Dylan, on crutches, skipped briskly around the house, chattering non-stop, not at all like a child tormented by worries. He was genuinely delighted to see Hannah. Dad, Hannah helped me up the stairs and I was so scared. I was afraid to fall again. She's brave. Hannah had imagined the nanny Vera as a young girl, but she turned out to be a woman in her 50s, short, chubby and cosy. The aroma of her pies filled the house. Dinner was delicious, but Dylan's mother was absent from the table. Hannah didn't inquire. It wasn't her business. Hannah, when I get my cast off, Daddy and I are going boating. Will you join us? I think the young man has a crush on you, Roger chimed in. Don't say no. It's beautiful there. Hannah felt flustered. She had never been in such a luxurious home, and it had been a long time since she had experienced such genuine interest in herself by a man. Dylan stayed by her side, regaling her with stories about school, friends, and hobbies. Roger smiled, trying not to interfere. When Roger drove Hannah home, he suddenly pulled over and said, Thank you. I haven't seen Dylan this happy in a long time, probably since his mother left. Roger, I saw a picture of your wife in Dylan's room. Where is she? I'm sorry, of course it's none of my business. I'll tell you, but I have a condition. First, we're going for coffee in that cafe over there. Roger hadn't married out of passion, but for love. His wife was a pure, sincere girl, affectionate and sweet, from a modest background. Roger enjoyed spoiling her with gifts and trips abroad. Perhaps this played a cruel role, as she came to believe everyone owed her, simply because she was so beautiful. When Dylan was 3, Roger came home to find a note. I've left. Don't look for me. I know you'll raise Dylan. I'm not coming back. I have a new life. During the divorce proceedings, Roger learned she was living in Paris. With whom? He didn't care to know. She had abandoned them. The child never received a call, though he cried and waited for his mother. Roger worked tirelessly, trying to be there for his son, but time was always lacking. Vera became a mother, grandmother, and saviour for little Dylan. She was like the guardian angel of his small family. A year ago, Roger thought he had found a woman who could make him happy. He harboured no illusions, knowing Gloria was more interested in his status and position than in him personally, which suited him fine. He felt no burning passion. Gloria was beautiful, intelligent, and fit the role of a vice president's girlfriend. She treated Dylan well, perhaps not too warmly, but with understanding. However, Dylan couldn't stand Gloria. He refused to eat if she sat at the table. When she arrived, he'd lock himself in his room. He answered monosyllabically, smiled forcedly, and made it clear he was unhappy with her presence. Roger assumed his son was jealous, believing time would sort things out. Gloria thought the same, assuring Roger she'd do everything to win Dylan over. One day, Gloria and Dylan were home alone. Roger was at work, and Vera had gone to the market. Gloria burst into Dylan's room, her dress covered in paint. "Did you do this?" "I didn't mean to." "Stop lying! You're always trying to sabotage me, you little brat! I'll get rid of you. Your father will send you to boarding school, I'll make sure of it. Your mother abandoned you, and she was right to do so." Suddenly, the door opened and Roger entered. "Get out!" "Honey, Get out!" Roger was astounded at how he could have gotten involved with such a deceitful, cruel woman. He'd been fooled by her beauty and feigned intelligence. After that, Roger made no further attempts to arrange his personal life. His son's peace of mind was far more valuable. "That's my life, Hannah. You know, I thought after Gloria, Dylan wouldn't accept any woman in the house. But today, he's been buzzing around you like a bee." Gradually, Roger and Dylan became part of Hannah's life. Their meetings were infrequent, but there was a warm, pleasant feeling of having people close to her. Though not quite friends yet, it was heading in that direction. When Dylan's cast was removed, the long-awaited boat ride took place. The lake was truly beautiful. After boating and ice cream, Dylan begged to visit the amusement park. While Dylan tried every ride in succession, seemingly immune to dizziness, Hannah and Roger strolled through the park's alleys. "Hannah, my father's anniversary is next week. I'm asking you to come with me. I know it's an odd request. Let me explain, and then you can decide." Roger's father, Mr. Bertrand, was a prominent figure, the owner of several machine-building factories in the region and beyond. He had recently opened a branch in his hometown, appointing 2 promising managers, his son Roger and his son-in-law Alex. The young men vied for Mr. Bertrand's trust, their views on business development radically different. Each tried to prove his project more promising, but Alex had a significant advantage. He was in a long, stable marriage to Roger's sister. For Mr. Bertrand, a strong family was synonymous with stability. Roger had married poorly, his wife dumped him, and he never managed to organize his personal life. He reasoned that if a man couldn't put his own life in order, he could hardly run a factory. When Gloria had just entered Roger's life, in an attempt to improve his reputation, he had told his father he was going to marry. Though he and Gloria had long since parted ways, Mr. Bertrand now demanded that Roger finally present his chosen one. "I want to see who my grandson will live with." Roger couldn't attend the anniversary alone, partly for career reasons, but mostly out of fear of disappointing his father. Mr. Bertrand was enthusiastic about the idea of his unhappy son finally having a family. He himself loved his wife dearly. She had died long ago, yet he never remarried and continued to wear his wedding ring. "Hannah, please pretend to be my girlfriend, just for 2 days. My father will stop lecturing me about the benefits of family life and worrying about Dylan's future. He'll see I can be trusted, finally approve my project, which is far better than Alex's. I know it sounds absurd, but please, help me? No, Roger, it's ridiculous. How will you explain later when the bride disappears? I'll figure that out later. If I come alone now, my father will be crushed. He'll think I've let him down, and I'm worthless. You don't have to do much. Just visit for 2 days. You'll have a good time there. I can imagine the good time. No, Roger, it's an utterly stupid idea. Think about it. There's still time. Hannah considered. She'd gladly accompany Roger on a visit, even to his father's house. But to play the bride? To pretend? To deceive? No, that was impossible. However, she wanted to help Roger so badly. To confirm her doubts, or perhaps dispel them, she called Chelsea. As usual, Chelsea had her own take. You must go. Why? Something might happen there. What could happen? What are you suggesting? Oh, please. It's obvious. You're adults. Why pretend? You can be friends with Dylan, but not with Roger. Hannah, don't be foolish. It's a great opportunity. You have to go. Well, thank you, dear. You know, your help has only increased my doubts. On Friday, Roger called. Hannah, what have you decided? Dylan's voice came through the phone. Daddy, give me the phone. Hannah, will you come with us? Daddy's really upset. Please be his fiancée. At least imaginary. Hannah relented. All right, I'll do it. Mr. Bertrand's country house was impressive. A bright, enormous palace rather than a mere house. A maid greeted them at the entrance. Good evening. You're expected in the parlour. I'll take your belongings to your rooms. Hannah was surprised by the empty house. Where are the guests? It turned out the celebration was tomorrow. Today was a quiet family dinner with only the father, sister Lindsay, and her husband Alex, Roger with Hannah, and the children. Hannah, Dad didn't ask me much about my bride or where she works, but I told him you write poems and play tennis. Great! If I recite something terrible, they'll just think I'm an untalented, aspiring poet. But tennis is worse. I've never held a racket. So try not to arrange any tennis matches here. You must have a court here, right? At the head of a large oval table sat a tall, grey-haired man, Mr. Bertrand. On one side sat a woman with a thin, nervous face, Lindsay, and a man with a hunted, tense look, Alex. A teenage girl and a boy of about 10 completed the group. The other half of the table was empty, presumably for Roger and his family. Hannah felt uneasy. The atmosphere was overly formal, like a scene with a magnanimous landlord and his servants. Mr. Bertrand stood and approached Roger, Hannah and Dylan as they lingered in the doorway. Hello, Roger. I'm delighted you've finally brought your bride. What's your name? Hannah. Hannah, meet my daughter Lindsay's family, and welcome to our family. Lindsay grimaced, thinking, just like that, into our family? Alex wasn't welcomed so warmly. She is a simple girl, probably after rich suitors. It turns out that it's a piece of cake to get Roger. He must have chosen to marry her out of spite, to steal the project from my husband, but we'll fight it. Dinner proceeded with the highest standards, featuring multiple courses and wines. Lindsay constantly ensured the children behaved properly, frequently scolding and correcting them. No one disciplined Dylan. He ate whatever he wanted, particularly enjoying the cake. Lindsay's son ate a piece and reached for another. Paul, that's enough. Paul fearfully glanced at his mother and withdrew his hand. Dylan looked slyly at Hannah. Hannah, may I have another piece? Of course, let me serve you. It seemed Dylan didn't like Lindsay's children too much. There was certainly no sense of kinship. Mr. Bertrand watched the family wars with a grin. He was amused by Lindsay's desire to show the importance of her untalented husband by any means, and saddened by Roger's inability to insist on his own. It had long been clear for him that Roger's project was superior. And now the father was happy that Roger would finally marry, and Dylan seemed to like his father's choice. "I think the children can go play now, and we'll talk more. You know how much effort it took to build my business. I don't want it all to crumble after I've gone. This project is a test of independence for Alex and Roger. Alex, you struggle with decision-making. Lindsay dictates your every move. Daughter, you should stop upbringing him. He's an adult. As for you, Roger, according to the latest report, the rolling department is stalling. Dad, we've already delivered new equipment there. We just need to adjust it." "What are you going to adjust? You can't adjust your life." "I'm sorry, Hannah, I don't mean you." Hannah was slightly shocked. What the hell is this? Not a dinner at all. Is it a meeting of irreconcilable relatives or an industrial meet-up? An interesting family. Mr. Bertrand is tough and straightforward. Roger is soft and non-confrontational. Lindsay is a lover of intrigue, and she didn't like me at all. She'll probably arrange some small mischief. Well, I just need to hold out for the night and day. And then was another surprise. Hannah and Roger were put in the same bedroom, rather than separating the bride and groom in different bedrooms. "How are we going to sleep?" Hannah asked. "I didn't think. I'm not ready for a wedding night." The man grinned. "Oh, really? I've been dreaming about it. That's why I came," Hannah replied in the same joking manner. "Okay, don't be mad. You take the bed. I'll sleep right here on the chair." "You won't fit." "I'll curl up." "Turn around, I'll change." Hannah opened the closet door and, hidden behind it, bumping elbows and knees, changed her clothes and ducked under the blanket. "That's it. Turn off the light, please." Strangely, she fell asleep almost immediately, probably due to too many impressions. In the morning, when Hannah lifted her head from the pillow, she saw Roger on the floor on a blanket. Ah, so the armchair was too small after all. "Roger, get up. There will be many guests today. I'm afraid I'll say something wrong." "You can say whatever you want, as long as my father believes in our story." "How will you explain yourself later? That we had a fight? Didn't agree on character? And if Mr. Bertrand finds out that I'm not a real bride, what will happen to you? He'll never be able to trust you again." Suddenly a rustle was heard behind the door. It opened, and Paul peeped in. "Uncle Roger, Mum asked me to tell you that breakfast is in 15 minutes. The door slammed shut as quickly as it opened. "So, Lindsay sent her son. He must have heard our conversation and seen the bed on the floor. I wonder if they'll feed us breakfast, or throw us out of the house right now." Hannah and Roger went down the stairs, and at the bottom stood Mr. Bertrand. "Everyone to my office, and call Dylan." In the office, everyone stood in a row, and Mr. Bertrand asked, "Lindsay, what did you want to say?" "Dad, they're lying to you. Hannah isn't a fiancée at all, just a fake girlfriend. Roger invented all this to promote his project. You don't trust Alex, and these con artists are fooling you. They're not even sleeping together." "How do you know? Did you hold a candle over them?" "Lindsay, Roger is your brother. Why are you burying him like this? You think I'll kick him out and make your sycophant the director? You don't know me well enough if you think I mix personal and business affairs. We'll find out who Hannah really is." "Dad, I won't let you hurt Hannah." "Roger, shut up. Dylan, tell me, who is Hannah?" "No one yet, but Dad gave her a ring and said they'll get married soon." "Are you happy?" "Of course. I love Hannah very much. I want her to live with us." "That's it. The conflict is over. Get ready to welcome the guests. Remember, it's my anniversary today." Hannah, in a simple dress, felt out of place among the ladies in evening clothes. Her nervousness was heightened by Lindsay, who kept glaring at her all evening. In the middle of the evening, when Mr. Bertrand was warm from congratulations and drinks, Lindsay whispered, "Dad, since they are getting married, can we arrange a surprise? Let's take care of the wedding ourselves." Finally, a sensible suggestion. He took a glass of champagne and turned to the guests. "Gentlemen, I have a toast. My son Roger is getting married." The guests clapped enthusiastically, reaching out to Roger with congratulations. Mr. Bertrand continued, "I'll take care of the wedding." Roger jerked to say something, but his father wouldn't let him. "Don't mind. I've made up my mind." "Hey, lovebirds, I've got you now. How will you get out of this?" thought Lindsay, looking at Roger and Hannah with a fake smile. Meanwhile, Hannah whispered into Roger's ear, "What the hell wedding?" "I'll think of something." "What will you think of, you thinker? Let's tell them right now. It'll only get worse." "Hannah, don't do it in front of everyone. We'll leave now, and that's it. It won't concern you anymore. I'll take care of it myself. I created this mess. I'll sort it out myself." They drove in silence. What was there to talk about? Hannah thought that this idea was nonsense from the beginning. "How could I agree? Thank you, Chelsea. Now I'll lose Roger and Dylan. I won't be able to communicate with them as before." As for Roger, he thought the best way out was to stop pretending and get married. "We can do it without a celebration. Just get married. All I need is Hannah around." It's a pity Hannah couldn't hear his thoughts. Dylan didn't think about anything. He slept. After that tumultuous day, Hannah had to somehow come to her senses. Filming, texts, test screenings, nothing helped. Hannah couldn't get the ambiguous situation she'd gotten herself into out of her head. She wanted to call Roger, but it felt awkward. There was some reticence and shyness between them now. I knew it. The friendship is over. A few days later, in the evening, as Hannah tried to concentrate on writing, but couldn't, the doorbell rang. A tall, pretty blonde stood on the threshold. "Hannah, I need to talk to you. I'm Carla." Hannah was surprised, but let her into the apartment. "Hannah, I understand you're offended. Kurt left. You realize he's not coming back. Give him a divorce. We have a son." "I don't understand anything. We've been divorced for a month now. So he didn't tell you? Maybe he decided to keep you as a backup wife. Carla, you may not believe me now, but chase that lying jerk out of your life. We both wasted years on a worthless man. I don't know about you. You must have known about me. Use your head. He won't change." "Let him go, I beg you." "What the hell?" Hannah opened the drawer, grabbed the divorce document, and shoved it under Carla's nose. "Look, here's the divorce stamp." Carla stared at it with wild eyes. "Carla, come to your senses. I know you love him. I loved him too. I couldn't imagine sharing him with another woman. Get rid of him. He'll be married, and you'll wait, forever remaining the second wife, the backup. It's harsh but true. As soon as you kick him out, a worthy man will appear. I know from experience." Carla stood up and quietly wandered towards the exit. At the threshold, she turned around, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, and forgive me. Well, here's more proof that I did the right thing. Kurt won't change. To hell with it. Roger doesn't call. That's the problem. Should I call him myself? No, the role of a fake bride has been played. Let him call me himself." Of course, she missed Roger and Dylan. Hannah was used to having them in her life, and it seemed that they would be. It even seemed to her that some special relationship was forming with Roger, but apparently it didn't happen. Well, and all right. There is work. There is Chelsea. I'll live. Roger didn't call. He came in person. "Hannah, I told Dad everything. How you saved Dylan. How I persuaded you to play the role of a bride. He got angry, of course. Not at you, but at me, and Lindsay. At Lindsay for her spite and scheming, at me for my stupidity and indecision. Mr. Bertrand, a man with a keen eye and a shrewd mind, qualities essential for running a business, immediately saw through Roger and Hannah's game. He realized Roger had brought not just a bride, but a woman he genuinely liked. He was amused by their attempts to maintain the charade without making mistakes. He appreciated Hannah's attitude towards Dylan, and when Dylan stood up to defend Hannah, Pavel knew his son had finally made the right choice. When Roger revealed the truth, his father told him he'd be a fool not to marry Hannah. To know if a girl wants to get married, you should at least ask her. You seem sensible, yet you can't see the obvious. I'm sure if you propose, she won't refuse. Pull yourself together. Why are you such a mumbler? Don't be afraid to take action. After talking to his father, Roger decided not to call, but to propose in person. He was exhausted, realizing he couldn't live without Hannah. Dad, without waiting for your answer, is already organizing the wedding. He's sure you'll agree, but I'm not so sure. I've never said, I love you, never asked if you love me. Hannah, I love you. Will you become my wife? Hannah smiled softly and said, yes. The bus driver dropped them off at an unremarkable, nameless bus stop, a sight that immediately alarmed them. Was this even where they were supposed to be? Mum, is this our stop? And where's the village? Why can't we see any houses? Madeline asked in surprise. In response, Roberta looked at the chauffeur, who helped her out of the bus. Yes, it's the right village, don't doubt it. I've been on this route for years. You need to go along this dirt road now, and then it's just a short walk to the village, the man explained. Roberta thanked him for his help and exhaled with relief, setting the suitcases on the sun-warmed asphalt. Travelling in reality was much more difficult than it seemed from the doctor's office. They had spent about 4 hours on the road, tired and demoralised by recent events, an extremely painful divorce, an unfair dismissal from her job, and hasty preparations to move, all within a tight time frame that gave Roberta herself a headache. Since Madeline had slept most of the way, Roberta had stayed awake to watch over her. Every time they hit a bump or pothole, the bus shuddered, making Roberta worry every time her daughter didn't fall. The bus doors clanked loudly as the driver started the engine and smoothly pulled away, leaving the travellers in a cloud of exhaust fumes. Well, my dear, shall we go? Roberta suggested, glancing at the departing bus. Yes, Mum, of course. We'll go. Before it gets dark. I'm afraid of wolves, the little girl said, looking around warily. Madeline had finished 2nd grade just a couple of months ago, yet she reasoned like an adult. Roberta smiled and replied in her usual joking manner, Don't worry, sunshine. There might be wolves here, but we're far from the forest. Don't think about it. Everything will be fine, I promise. Joyful sparkles appeared in the girl's eyes. Really? Well, let's go quickly then. Do you know if our house will be big or not so big? Roberta shrugged uncertainly. Oh, I wish I knew. I inherited it by chance. A kind patient's gift. Taking the suitcases in both hands, she walked down the dirt road the chauffeur had indicated. Madeline obediently followed, kicking up clouds of dust with her little feet. Since the settlement was on a hill, they had to walk upward continuously. After about 600 meters, Roberta finally exhausted herself and set the suitcase on the ground. My strength is definitely not enough, she thought wistfully, barely keeping on her feet from such a load. Mum, are you tired? Why don't I carry it? Madeline suggested, concern in her voice. Roberta looked at her daughter with a smile. How could you carry it? It weighs more than you do. At that moment, Roberta suddenly heard a strange noise behind her. What is that? A motorcycle? No, it's much louder and it's humming. A car! My God, it's a car, Roberta thought. To her surprise, when she turned around, she saw a distinctive car with a taxi sign. A cab? Who would call a cab in such backwoods? She whispered. Mum, could it be a car coming for us? Madeline asked hopefully. No. Who would send a cab for us? There's no one. Meanwhile, the car in a cloud of dust pulled up to the tired travellers. The cab driver stopped and, opening the passenger door, said, I can give you a lift to the village if you need it. Have a seat, and I'll load the suitcases. Roberta exchanged a questioning look with Madeline, then decided to accept the offer. Taking the front seat, she put her daughter in the back and closed the door. In no time, the tall cab driver had stowed their suitcases in the trunk. Let's go, shall we? I'm Jason. The driver introduced himself and started the engine. Roberta, and this is my daughter Madeline, replied the passenger, slightly embarrassed. The cab driver nodded, and his conspicuous yellow car roared to life, driving towards the village. To pass the time, Roberta cautiously asked, Are you on a call? The driver smiled. Yes, I'm taking medicines to the paramedic station. They've equipped a medical centre in the village, and I was hired as a courier to pick up medicine from the pharmacy warehouse. It's much more convenient, especially since I've made this trip before. Oh, a paramedic station, that's impressive. I wouldn't have thought so. It's just a village. Does it even have its own medical officer? Roberta remarked, respect in her voice. Well, how could it be otherwise? There isn't a single medical point in the whole country, and you can't easily go to the district clinic. You need transportation here. There's just one problem. The doctor is a retired man, Mr. McCourt. He's 80 years old, but still at his post. Unfortunately, he's taken ill with sciatica. There's no one to see patients. The cab driver replied, keeping his eyes on the road. Roberta nodded sympathetically and looked out the window. On both sides of the road stretched endless yellow fields and sparse forest belts, which gradually merged into a dense forest. Where are you headed anyway? What's the address? The cab driver asked again. Roberta flinched, then pulled out a folded piece of paper from her purse. Unfolding it, she read the address. Do you know where it is? The driver hit the brakes in surprise, and the car came to an abrupt halt. Jason, what's wrong? Is something the matter? She asked anxiously. The driver looked at her with surprise and said, Are you sure? You're not confused? Well, yes. What's there to confuse? It's written clearly in black and white. The cab driver shook his head apologetically. You must have been given the wrong address. At that location is the paramedic station, where I'm delivering medicine for Mr. McCourt. Roberta gasped in surprise. A paramedic station? But there must be a house there. I inherited it from Douglas Hurst. I have the documents I can show you. Jason glanced at the passenger with a hint of irony. I believe you, but why show me those documents? I wouldn't understand them anyway. Roberta bit her lip with resentment and turned to the window. This was unexpected news. She had such hopes for this house. Now where could she go? All because of her unfaithful husband Neil, who had thrown her and her daughter out after the divorce to indulge in pleasures with a young mistress. Soon the village came into view. Roberta immediately spotted the house she sought on the outskirts. As it turned out, the cab driver was right. The house, given to Roberta in the will, indeed housed a medical centre. How did it happen? Is there a mistake in the documents? She thought glumly. Meanwhile, Jason stopped the car at the gate, which bore a red cross painted on it. Mum, are we going to live in the hospital? Madeline asked cautiously. Roberta shrugged uncertainly. To be honest, I don't know myself, Madeline. I didn't expect it to be like this. After setting Roberta's suitcases in front of the gate, Jason pulled out a small bundle of medical supplies and started banging on the gate. Hey, anyone there? Delivery's here. Roberta looked around warily. It seemed the entire settlement was watching her every move, despite the fact that the village itself continued its measured, unhurried life. Dogs barked, geese cackled, cows grazed peacefully in a distant pasture, due to return at dusk, driven by the shepherd's calls. Soon after Jason knocked, the front door creaked open. A minute later the gate swung wide, revealing a disgruntled woman of about 30, dressed in a characteristic white medical coat. She eyed the guests hostilely and asked the cab driver, "Hello, Jason. Who are these people? Your acquaintances?" The driver coughed embarrassedly. "No, Brooke. I was passing by and saw Roberta and Madeline walking along the road. I couldn't just leave them." Brooke wrinkled her nose as if in pain. "What do they want here? And where's the promised medicine?" The driver opened his mouth to answer, but Roberta beat him to it. "I've come to my house. Well, not exactly mine, but that doesn't change the point." "Not exactly yours. Are you sure you're not confused?" Brooke questioned. "No, it's all correct. I have the documents right here, notarized and certified," Roberta replied, a bit flustered by her own frankness. "Documents, you say? Well, come in then. You'll need to show these papers to the chairman and Mr. McCourt," Brooke answered, more calmly now. One could easily guess she was a junior medical worker, like a nurse or an orderly. "Well, now that you've sorted it out, I'll be on my way," Jason said. "Here's the medicine. Everything's according to the inventory, and the package seal is intact." He headed for his car as evening was approaching, and he still had to return the taxi to the parking lot. "Bye, Jason. Come again. Please, keep in mind," Brooke called out, watching him leave with a fond look. "Oh, Shakespearean passions are at play here. That's why she snapped at me like an angry cat. She must be jealous," Roberta thought, barely suppressing a smile. Only after the cab rounded the corner did Brooke decide to let the guests into the house, though she refused to help Roberta with the suitcases. Roberta smiled but didn't reproach Brooke. Why strain relationships on their first day? Who knew how life could unfold? They might end up working side by side. "Actually, this house is divided in two," Brooke explained as she let them in. "One half is Mr. McCourt's medical centre, the other is living quarters. It was neglected for a long time, then the local chairman renovated it for the doctor to live in, after his house burned down. His son and daughter-in-law live in the other side of the country, so he didn't want to impose. Most likely, your will specifies this residential half of the house." "It's quite cosy, even better than I expected," Roberta remarked cautiously. "You bet it is. They've done quite a renovation at the chairman's expense for Mr. McCourt," Brooke retorted bluntly. Roberta bit her lip, stung by the remark. They certainly weren't rushing to welcome her with open arms. But that was fine. The main thing was that she had finally rid herself of those cumbersome suitcases and could set them down in the hallway.
"Brooke, dear, who's there? Has Jason brought the medicine?"
A man's voice, trembling with weakness, called out. "Yes and no, Mr. McCourt. It's quite different. Jason's already left, and here are the heirs." Brooke replied, her tone dripping with disdain for the newcomers. Roberta's indignation left her breathless. How dare this nurse speak to her in such a tone? Didn't she and her daughter deserve some basic respect?
"Heirs are serious business. Let them through. And Brooke, if it's not too much trouble, please make some tea for me and the guests,"
the man replied in the same weak voice. Brooke threw an angry glance in Roberta's direction, as if it were her fault that Mr. McCourt was ill and couldn't attend to his guests himself.
"All right, I'll do it now,"
Brooke replied through gritted teeth. Roberta smiled and entered Mr. McCourt's room. He was a man in his 80s with a wrinkled face and kind grey eyes.
"Hello, dear guests, come in. Tell me, what brings you here?"
The elderly man broke the prolonged silence. Roberta hesitated, then took out a folder from her purse containing the will of the late Mr. Hurst. "Here, the documents, take it," she said. "I'm sorry to be so abrupt, but if not for the circumstances, I would never have come here unannounced." Mr. McCourt smiled, but didn't examine the will, taking Roberta at her word. At 82, he had learned to understand people and immediately realized she was telling the truth. Besides, what reason would this nice woman with a little girl and 2 suitcases have to lie?
"Don't worry. I won't turn you away. Please sit down," said Mr. McCourt. "In fact, it's all my fault things happened this way. This house had been empty for at least 10 years, so I decided to use it for my needs. This half of the house used to belong to Douglas Hurst, my childhood friend, but then he moved to the city and hasn't been here for a decade. So I decided, so to speak, to take over the house myself. If Douglas came back, I'd return it without a word."
"What about the repairs? You've invested so much money and effort here, haven't you?" Roberta asked sceptically. Mr. McCourt waved his hand.
"Come now, what's money? Today you have it, tomorrow you don't. Is that what happiness is about? The important thing is that we've set up a medical centre here. People come to us from all the surrounding areas, and sometimes even from the city. It's just a pity that my health is failing. I'd like a colleague or 2 to take over, to help in emergencies. I can barely manage on my own. Brooke is a nurse and there's a lot of work to do."
At that moment, Roberta's eyes lit up. "I'm a general practitioner. Maybe I can be of use. Until a week ago, I worked in the therapy department at the city hospital." Mr. McCourt raised an eyebrow in surprise.
"The therapy department, you say? What luck! We desperately need such specialists. Would you consider working for us? Here, I mean. I can't promise a significant salary, as our operation is mostly voluntary, you know. But I'll talk to the chairman. He is an understanding man. I think he can arrange a decent salary for you."
Roberta shook her head. "What do you mean? Are you working independently of the local government?" Mr. McCourt smiled.
"Indeed we are. We work in challenging conditions, providing assistance to the population due to the lack of necessary specialists. Not everyone can afford a trip to the city. Buses don't run often, so we help here and refer to city specialists when needed."
"Like my mum?" Madeline interjected a bit awkwardly.
"Yes, like your mum,"
Mr. McCourt replied, addressing her seriously. Roberta looked at the elderly doctor with a smile, struck by a thought. He truly is a good man. While others his age tend to focus on themselves, he's taken the initiative to organise a paramedic station in a village deprived of medical care. Seeing the amazement in Roberta's eyes, Mr. McCourt said,
"My dear, make yourself at home. I have 2 free rooms here. I'll live in one until I can find something better, and you and your daughter can have the other. Or both, I won't mind. At my age I've learned not to chase luxuries. I've grown accustomed to living simply, in Spartan conditions, so to speak."
Tears glistened in Roberta's eyes. She had longed for such words of support, especially from men, after enduring many hardships in her life. "Mum, when are we going to eat? I'm hungry," Madeline piped up, breaking the poignant silence. Roberta shrugged absent-mindedly, then remembered she had packed sandwiches and tea in a thermos for the journey. The eventful trip, however, had left no time for lunch. "How about we all have dinner together?" Roberta suggested to the elderly doctor. Mr. McCourt immediately waved his hands in protest.
No, thank you. I've had enough tea. I have no appetite at all, especially with this illness gripping me like a vice. When I was young, I used to go diving, exploring riverbeds, you know. Back then, we called it something else. Foolishly, I spent too much time in the water and developed sciatica. Now, I only see underwater depths on the TV screen," he said with a wistful smile. "But perhaps there are new treatments available. Medicine has come a long way. What about ointments or injections?" Roberta inquired gently. "No, my dear, I don't want any medicine any more. I treat myself more and more with herbs, and I help people because I know That's the most I can do for them," Mr. McCourt said, shaking his head. "My son and daughter-in-law live 2,000 kilometers away from me, so I can't travel much. They don't have children yet, but my son says everything will be fine. There's no rush. I once thought there was no need to hurry, but when the threat of childlessness appeared, we all got nervous. Fortunately, I was lucky to have a son, but it's still unclear how they'll fare with children."
At that moment the door opened, and Brooke appeared with a tray bearing 3 cups of fragrant steaming tea. "Here, Mr. Court, help yourself," she said to the elderly doctor, pretending that Roberta and Madeline weren't in the room.
"Thank you, Brooke. God grant you health and a good fiancé. You should go out. You must be tired of living alone. It's hard, especially in a house where you can't handle with chores without a man," Mr. McCourt said sympathetically.
Brooke visibly blushed at these words and gave the guests a worried look. Roberta immediately realized that the nurse didn't want her to know about her personal life. However, Roberta had never been overly curious and always avoided gossip or discussing others' shortcomings.
"Brooke, why didn't you make tea for yourself?"
Mr. McCourt asked, concerned. "Oh, no, I don't feel like it. I just had a cup. I'll probably go home. Don't think there'll be any more patients today," Brooke answered with forced calmness. Roberta quickly understood the situation. The nurse simply didn't want to sit at the same table with her. Clearly, Brooke saw her as a rival, though Roberta didn't see it that way. What kind of rival could she be? What could she do to this woman who had lived here since birth? If Roberta's life had been normal, would she have moved to this wilderness with a young daughter? Unlikely. After all, just a couple of weeks ago, she at least had her favourite job. Now she had nothing but half of this small house in the middle of nowhere. Sipping the fragrant, tart tea, Roberta didn't notice how she slipped into sad memories of her past. A whirlpool of events and images swirled around her like a magical kaleidoscope, events appearing in a random order. She had met her future husband, Neil Meeks, at a medical institution, where he was already a successful doctor, and she had just graduated from university and completed her internship. By then, rumours circulated about Neil being a womanizer who didn't miss a single skirt. Naturally, Roberta didn't believe a word from her future colleagues, who warned that Neil would definitely try to get her into bed. And of course this didn't happen immediately, as Roberta, raised on romantic ideals, never rushed things, wanting to thoroughly understand a man's character before letting him into her personal life. Realizing he couldn't get the melancholic beauty so easy, Neil changed tactics and began courting her with the extravagance of someone who could afford it. His parents held high positions in the Ministry of Health and promoted their son relentlessly, eventually securing his appointment as head of the department. Of course, none of the therapy staff doubted that Neil Meeks got his position solely thanks to his parents. They pushed him forward like an icebreaker, carving through Arctic waters. More experienced and qualified doctors had vied for the department head position, but Neil clinched it. While this might seem incredible to some, for the young doctor, conquering this peak was merely one step in his rapidly advancing career. Ironically, his appointment coincided with the start of his relationship with Roberta, who finally reciprocated his advances and began to consider herself his fiancée. Neil visibly tensed at this development, as marriage wasn't in his plans at all. Yet, being with Roberta felt comfortable, and he saw no harm in tying himself to her. Moreover, Roberta was 2 months pregnant, which tipped the scales toward a hasty wedding. Truthfully, Neil had always dreamed of living as a bachelor until 40, childless and free from family obligations. In his fantasies, he saw himself as a dashing knight, conquering women's hearts with enviable regularity. But the news of Roberta's pregnancy changed his life dramatically. Roberta, meanwhile, struggled terribly during her pregnancy. She suffered from morning sickness and dizziness, which drove her mad and prevented her from focusing on anything. Neil offered no support, as expected. When Roberta woke at night with a stomach discomfort, her husband would simply roll over or even leave for another room, turning on the TV at full volume. The situation worsened when Roberta discovered she was carrying twins, which her negligent husband had seen on the ultrasound monitor. Neil then seemed to go off the rails. For reasons incomprehensible to Roberta, he suddenly began working day and night, staying away from home for days at a time. When the woman timidly asked where he disappeared to, her husband simply replied, "Problems, Roberta. They've completely overwhelmed me. The ministry kept calling, they scolded the chief physician, and then he reamed us all out. It's hard work now, not like it used to be." Roberta said anxiously, "You should take a break anyway, or your lack of sleep will harm you. And then there's the food. You know, it can lead to gastritis and ulcers. What could you eat when you don't leave the office for 24 hours? Neil barely suppressed a chuckle and replied, "It's nothing, Roberta, I'll manage. I'll run to the canteen." In reality, he didn't go to any canteen, but spent all his spare time with his mistress. Rumours suggested that by the time his daughter Madeline was born, Neil had 3 mistresses. He managed to juggle several women simultaneously, unburdened by conventions or responsibilities. It so happened that contractions caught Roberta at home, as she had hoped until the last moment that the babies would be born on the date set by the doctors. However, things turned out quite differently. Unfortunately, Neil was not at home, and Roberta had to call an ambulance, which arrived half an hour late due to a heavy snowstorm and ice. Meanwhile, her husband was enjoying himself at a roadside hotel with his mistress, oblivious to his wife's tough time. To avoid disturbances, he had turned off his phone and learned about his daughter's birth only 2 days later. But the most shocking part was yet to come. The first thing Neil asked was, "Why only one girl? Where's the other one? What happened, Roberta? Why aren't you saying anything?" The young mother sobbed softly, then began to cry hysterically. As it happened, the doctors were unable to save both babies, and Roberta's joy at the birth of one daughter was overshadowed by her grief at the loss of the second. The C-section was performed on time, and the surgeon on duty did everything correctly. While this elementary operation seemed harmless, each case is unique, and there's always a risk of complications. Roberta didn't blame her colleagues in the medical field or anyone else. As a therapist herself, she understood that life sometimes puts people in difficult situations. Roberta sobbed, crying all day long, hugging her pillow, until an elderly midwife approached her and took her hand. "Oh, sweetheart, I understand it hurts. I know it hurts a lot, but you must endure. You have to live for your second daughter. Otherwise, while you're here, they'll put her on artificial nutrition. You know, there's nothing more valuable for a baby than mother's milk." Roberta sobbed and pressed her cheek against the shoulder of this wise, kind woman. For some inexplicable reason, after Madeline's birth, Neil grew freezing towards his wife and began to blame her for the second daughter's death. "It's all your fault. If you had gone to the hospital in time, everything would have been fine. What were you waiting for? You should have spent the last 2 weeks at the hospital, but you were drawn to your home." Roberta turned pale, her face changing. "What's that got to do with it? You're not an obstetrician, but the head of the therapeutic department. You have no right to tell me how it would have been better or worse," she replied. Neil grinned. "Well, look, you know, you're always getting requests from the provinces for valuable personnel. I can easily fire you, or even transfer you to some backwater, and I'll definitely send you there if you keep behaving like this." "Do what you want. Send me to the wilderness or the far north. I don't care any more," Roberta replied, tears in her eyes. Neil kept disappearing for 24 hours at a time, turning his life into an endless series of affairs and drinking binges. Now he didn't even hide that he spent his time away from his desk, boasting about his company of long-legged beauties or new, clever nurses. 8 years passed imperceptibly, though they seemed an eternity to Roberta. Day after day, it was the same. Work, home, work. Probably like all mothers. During this time, Roberta managed to enroll Madeline in kindergarten after her maternity leave ended, and then in school. She did all this by herself, with practically no support from her husband. Roberta's in-laws also disliked Madeline and rarely agreed to have their granddaughter visit. At one point, Roberta even thought they considered her granddaughter a stranger or born of another man. But what other man could there have been when she worked side by side with Neil in the same department? It's hard to say how long their life together would have continued if Roberta hadn't met an elderly patient who had been in the clinic for 3 weeks. To her dismay, Mr. Hurst didn't hide the fact that he would likely never leave the medical institution, and therefore treated everything with philosophical calmness and restraint. Roberta got along with him from the first days of their acquaintance. The wise man had lived a hard life and loved to tell stories about his childhood in the remote village. According to him, he still had a house there. Given the seriousness of Mr. Hurst's illness, Roberta realized that it was impossible to cure him. However, she could ease his suffering with care and competently selected drug therapy.
"Thank you, Roberta. You're all I have left. I had a son, but he's gone, the poor soul. He went to prison as a boy and has been behind bars ever since. He'd get out, walk free for a year, and then go back in. Recently I received news that he died in a prison riot. I don't know what happened, but they sent me a coffin with an obituary and just 2 words. They wouldn't even let me open the lid. Of course I cried and mourned, then organised the funeral. As soon as that was done, I came straight here. Then you ran the tests and quickly discovered I was ill. I used to be patient and brave, trying to cure, but now I've realised it was all pointless."
"Come on, Mr. Hurst. You still have a long way to go. I'll prescribe you a new medication, and you'll feel much better. Rest assured, I've dealt with more severe cases than yours." Roberta hastened to reassure him, but it was impossible to deceive a man wise beyond his years. One evening during her shift, he called her over and asked her to sit in the chair beside his bed. Seeing the unspoken question in the doctor's eyes, the elderly patient continued,
"Listen, Roberta, I'm sorry to meddle, but your Neil, the head of the department, he's not a good man. He's cheating on you left and right, and not just with one woman. They don't even know about each other. I'm in the ward every day. I notice everything. I apologise for being so direct. Anyone else in my position would have kept quiet, pretended it wasn't happening, but I can't do that. Leave him. Better yet, run away, and take your daughter with you. I've seen her, Madeline. She's a good girl. She came to visit you at lunchtime once."
Roberta looked at the elderly patient with pity. What else could she say? Mr. Hurst had already voiced what was building up in her soul, like the boiling magma of a volcano. Perhaps she simply lacked the strength to leave her husband and start anew. Not everyone could be a femme fatale with a heart of ice.
"If he had just cheated on you, Roberta, I wouldn't have said anything. But he speaks so nastily about you, ridicules you so much, even in public. Everyone here knows about it, except you. Leave him, honey. Leave him. You can raise the child yourself. You're not stupid. And don't have any more dealings with this bloodsucker."
Mr. Hurst added regretfully, shaking his head. Roberta looked at the elderly man doubtfully. "Where would I go, Mr. Hurst? I have nowhere to live. I live in his house with Madeline. And work? He's my boss, after all. I do as he says. The chain of command still exists." Mr. Hurst pondered for a moment, then said,
Listen, Roberta, here's the deal. I have a house in the village. I haven't been there for 10 years, but they say it's still standing. It'll last for decades. I want to bequeath it to you so you and your daughter can start a new life. You've treated me like a human being with all your heart. I want to repay kindness with kindness, as my parents taught me in childhood."
After these words, Roberta protested, waving her hands. "No, no, Mr. Hurst, don't do this. How can it be? This is your home port, so to speak. What's it got to do with me? I'm just a single mum from the city." To her sincere regret, it was impossible to change Mr. Hurst's mind. Taking her hand, he quietly added,
"I will give this house only to you and your daughter. No one else deserves it. Of course, you could give it to the state, but I want some memory of me to remain, and I'll wager you a house too. It's a bit far, though, about 3 or 4 hours away, but I think you'll manage."
Roberta shook her head doubtfully. "Well, I don't know, Mr. Hurst, whether I'll manage or not. I'll try, of course, but we'll see. I need to prepare myself too. Madeline's in school, and even though it's vacation now, it's still a new place with new conditions." Mr. Hurst nodded in agreement, then laid his final trump card on the table.
"Don't delay with your resignation, dear. Your husband wants to help you."
"What do you mean, help?" Roberta asked, confused.
"He wants to lay you off under some trumped-up charge. I've heard him talking to his subordinates about it, the ones he keeps as his henchmen. So keep your ear to the ground. If they terminate your employment, it'll be much worse than if you quit on your own terms. I'll sign the house over to you anyway. Don't think too long. Get ready and go."
Roberta nodded, not yet knowing this would be their last conversation. To the elderly man's credit, he called a notary that same day and drew up a gift deed. The next morning, Mr. Hurst was gone. Sadly, the elderly patient's departure coincided with the threat he'd warned Roberta about. Neil, having decided to rid himself of his bothersome wife and daughter, had already raised his hand to strike. To start, he publicly accused Roberta of negligence and irresponsibility at work. His wife couldn't tolerate it and immediately protested. "Where do you see my negligence, Dr. Meeks?" Neil grinned smugly.
"Where? Well, for instance, you haven't left Mr. Hurst's room for 24 hours. Were the other patients worse than him? I don't need such useless employees. I want order, not what you've done here. So pack your things and leave."
Barely containing herself, Roberta asked quietly, "What things do I need to pack?" Neil's smile widened.
"What things? Don't play dumb, the ones lying around my house. That's it. We're living apart from now on."
At that moment, Roberta felt as if she'd been doused with ice water. "What do you mean, apart? And Madeline? We've lived together for 8 years.
8 years isn't eternity. Let's not drag this out, shall we? And also I suggest you to start your career in a new place, and better not in this city,"
her husband concluded. Leaving her hated husband's office, Roberta stopped in the middle of the corridor, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed. Instantly, her world had turned upside down. Mr. Hurst was gone, and within hours, his most unpleasant warning had come true. At that moment, Roberta realized she had to take the elderly patient's words seriously. She hurriedly packed her belongings and set off for the remote village he had often mentioned. Roberta knew she would have to start her life anew, unsure whether her story would unfold on a pristine, unblemished page or resemble a second grader's messy dictation. Challenges lay ahead, especially in finding work. After all, who needs a doctor in the middle of nowhere? Meanwhile, thanks to his court connections, Neil finalized their divorce in mere days, bypassing the mandatory reflection period. Roberta, however, made a grave mistake. She refused alimony from her despised husband, a decision she would come to regret many times over. Now, Sipping fragrant tea, she caught herself thinking about how difficult her first days in the settlement would be.
"What's on your mind, Roberta?" Mr. McCourt asked. "You'll be my assistant, or rather, you'll be the doctor, and I'll be your assistant, as I have no strength left. Thank Douglas for sending such a capable person to our village. God rest his soul."
Roberta hesitated. While she was getting a place to live and work, she realized it might be uncomfortable to share half a house with a child. But then again, what good had come from living in the massive mansion Neil's parents had given them as a wedding gift? In the end, Roberta would never walk through that door again. It was time to live her own life. "Yes, Mr. McCourt, I agree," she said cautiously. "Just give me some time to adapt and learn about your paramedic station."
"Of course, dear. What are you talking about? I completely understand. You probably had different equipment and an office in the city, but here it's rather minimalist, you see. We're hoping for sponsors. Maybe some philanthropist will help. But just think how much help we'll bring to people."
Mr. McCourt smiled. His pleasant voice had a calming effect, fostering a kind and positive mood. Only the nurse, Brooke, seemed to dislike Roberta at first sight. Initially, Roberta mistakenly believed that Brooke's jealousy extended not only to the cab driver Jason, but also to the elderly doctor. However, it wasn't jealousy in the literal sense. More likely, Brooke simply wanted to be the first in everything, and Roberta's appearance threatened her status as the premier figure in village medicine. Naturally, a nurse was always subordinate to an experienced doctor, as Roberta had a diploma and extensive medical knowledge. While Roberta could perform minor procedures like injections, IVs, blood pressure readings, or blood sugar tests, Brooke couldn't compare to a doctor-therapist overall. She envied Roberta and saw her as a rival, an outsider trying to assert herself at others' expense. A week passed. Roberta quickly became involved in the work, soon becoming Mr. Court's right hand. They worked tirelessly for the common good, helping everyone in the village, young and old alike. Sometimes, when in a reflective mood, Mr. McCourt would reminisce about the old days when he and Douglas were classmates. Living next door to each other, they used to play soccer, go fishing, and swim in the river. Lately, after their military service, Douglas moved to the city, while Mr. McCourt stayed in the village. Rumours suggested that a full-fledged district hospital once existed here, but over time funding ceased and the building stood empty. The hospital was disbanded, and the equipment was relocated to the district centre.
"I was distressed at the time," Mr. McCourt recalled. "I kept saying, how can this be? The village will wither away. As a promising doctor, I was offered a position in the region, but I decided to stay here. For a while I worked as an ambulance paramedic, then saw patients at home. When I retired, I realized we needed to open a medical station to help people, especially those living in such a remote area who can't easily reach the district clinic."
Roberta nodded. "Yes, you're right. I agree completely. You're doing a wonderful thing. I can't think of anything better. And it's true, getting to the district centre is no easy task."
Mr. McCourt smiled. "The roads here are so bad, so it's hard for car and bus drivers, though Jason is a golden boy. He and his older sister were orphans. You probably don't even know that Jason doesn't live alone, do you?"
"Who does he live with? Married, I suppose?" Roberta asked casually.
"No, he isn't, Roberta. Jason is raising his nephew, his late sister's son. She and her husband were killed in an accident, and the boy was at risk of ending up in an orphanage, so Jason took him under his guardianship. Now Tommy goes to kindergarten, and Jason drives a cab in his spare time. When their schedules don't align, he has to hire a nanny. You know, it takes a lot of money, so I try to help in any way I can. I give him work. I even got him a courier job for us," Mr. McCourt replied. Frankly, Roberta was shocked by the elderly doctor's story. She had always thought
Jason was just an ordinary cab driver, making ends meet as best he could, but now she saw the man in a different light. In a candid and intimate conversation with Mr. Court, Roberta learned that a year ago, Brooke and Jason had been seriously preparing for their wedding, which was to take place in just a couple of weeks. But Brooke left him after he decided to formalize the guardianship of his nephew. In a heated moment, the woman told Jason that she found the constantly crying baby unpleasant. The man reacted calmly, avoiding any drama or scandal. He simply packed his things and disappeared into the night with the baby. When the angry veil lifted from the young nurse's eyes, she regretted her words and repeatedly begged Jason for forgiveness. But the young man never forgave her. Deep down, he realized he could never again trust her. Roberta and Jason felt a mutual attraction and sympathy from the moment they met, which Brooke disliked. She tried every trick to prevent their communication. However, since Roberta was her boss, Brooke could only harm her in small ways, attempting to make the new doctor look unpleasant. Jason seemed not to notice and continued to communicate with Roberta, growing fonder of her by the day. Watching their interactions, Mr. McCourt smiled and mentally thanked fate for sending him such a clever assistant. Little did he know that the late Mr. Hurst had done this intentionally, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, helping an unhappy mother escape an unfaithful husband, and providing his favourite village with a highly qualified doctor. At first, Roberta resented Mr. Hurst for not telling her the house was originally divided into 2 parts, but over time she realised that the settlement was truly the best place on earth. On weekends, she walked with Madeline and Jason by the river, picked mushrooms in the forest, and enjoyed nature. During these moments, Roberta recalled how sad and dreary she felt, spending weekends with her ex-husband Neil, who was always preoccupied with something. Brooke, on the other hand, grew annoyed and secretly wept when she saw Roberta and Jason spending time together. Once, the cunning nurse even complained about Roberta directly to Mr. Court, claiming she spoke ill of him. But the elderly doctor immediately saw through Brooke's attempt to turn him against his colleague.
Brooke, I don't believe a word you're saying. I'm sorry, but jealousy and envy are not admirable qualities. Get over it. Let Jason go. He's no longer yours.
We'll see about that, Brooke muttered, slamming the door loudly as she left. 6 months passed imperceptibly. Roberta and Jason grew so close that they considered themselves a couple. Despite Brooke's intrigues, their relationship strengthened daily, filling their hearts with love and mutual respect. One day, in desperation, Brooke planted a lipstick in Jason's car, knowing full well that Roberta didn't use makeup. She hoped her rival would notice the foreign object and become angry, but Roberta merely laughed and tossed the lipstick in the trash, leaving Brooke to lament the loss of her expensive cosmetics. A month later, Roberta learned that Neil had become a defendant in a criminal case involving large bribes and fraud at the city hospital. A large-scale investigation resulted in the removal of not only the head doctor, but almost all department heads implicated in the abuse of power. Soon after, a new chief physician visited the village and offered Roberta the vacant position of department head back in the city. She looked at him with surprise and shook her head. "No, I'm sorry, I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy here." Mr. McCourt intervened.
"Roberta, wait, don't be hasty. Maybe you should reconsider. It's such a great career opportunity."
But Roberta smiled firmly. "No, I'll stay here." At that moment, Brooke held her breath, imagining Roberta packing up and returning to the city, leaving Mr. McCourt and Jason in her care. But Roberta's decision to stay, no matter what, dashed Brooke's hopes. Roberta steadfastly refused the guest's offer. Now the young woman had found her place in the province and didn't want to leave what she had grown to love. Suddenly, something clicked in Brooke's mind. Catching up with the head doctor on the street, she quietly asked, "Dr. Marsh, would you consider taking me on as a nurse? I've been working here in the province for 4 years, and I'd like to move to the city for better living arrangements and career opportunities." Dr. Marsh raised an eyebrow in surprise, then looked to Mr. McCourt, who was standing on the porch of the medical station. "Colleague, may I take Brooke with me?" The elderly doctor nodded. "Of course. Brooke is a worthy employee, diligent and very capable. You won't regret hiring her." From that day on, Roberta and Brooke never crossed paths again. Rumour had it that Brooke's ambition so impressed the new head doctor that within 3 months he proposed to the beauty from the province. Ironically, around the same time, Jason and Roberta tied the knot in a small, modest ceremony at a church in a neighbouring village. The celebration of this momentous event was attended by inhabitants from several nearby villages, each eager to congratulate their favourite doctor who had treated them at least once. Looking at the newlyweds' joyful faces, Mr. McCourt smiled and silently thanked his childhood friend Douglas, who had changed their lives for the better and given them an invaluable specialist devoted to her work with heart and soul. Kate heard the key turn in the door and shuddered in surprise. It's still early. Brooke usually comes home later. Maybe it's a short day at work? Tomorrow is Mother's Day, after all. Kate was upset because she thought she still had time. She practiced her vocals with free online lessons when no one was home. Shy in front of others, she kept her hobby secret. Her family didn't approve. To be precise, only Brooke disapproved. But since Brooke was clearly the head of the family, Kate tried not to upset her. "Kate, why haven't you taken out the trash yet?" Brooke was always like this, reproachful instead of offering a simple greeting. She reproached her for everything, for not wiping the dust, for the plates left on the table. Then, like now, for not taking out the trash. But today Kate hadn't had time. She'd gotten home late from school. Today they'd talked a lot about mums, reminding everyone not to forget to congratulate them tomorrow on such a special day. One boy, Bill, gave a touching speech about mothers. Kate would never have thought him so sensitive and deep. Many people had teary eyes, including Kate, but her tears weren't light like the others. It was at times like this that she felt especially unhappy and alone. Some classmates looked at her, those who knew Kate's fate. Under those glances, the girl felt inexplicably guilty. All these people listening to Bill's speech had mothers, even their teachers, Mrs. White, though she was nearly a pensioner herself. But Kate's mum was long gone, which made Bill's words so painful for her. It was fortunate that at that moment, Tallulah Connor, the math teacher, entered the classroom. She wanted to ask Mrs. White something, but when she saw Kate, she immediately understood. "Kate, come to my office, please." Mrs. Connor was very understanding. She was also beautiful, kind and smart. In her lessons, even the worst troublemakers sat quietly, listening to her every word and keeping others from getting distracted. Moreover, she had known Kate's mother well. They weren't exactly friends, but they'd often talk at length when they met by chance on the street. This was because Tallulah had grown up alongside Kate's dad. They'd been in the same kindergarten group, then deskmates at school. Their paths divulged only after high school, when Kate's father went to study construction and Tallulah pursued accounting. In the end, neither became what they'd studied for. Kate's father worked as a trucker, the only way he could earn enough to support his family. Tallulah ended up at the school, though she'd never seen herself as a teacher. In Kate's opinion, fate had intervened because Tallulah was the most wonderful teacher imaginable. She never shouted at the children, always explained everything calmly, and, most importantly, clearly. Her lessons were interesting, even exciting. complex knowledge somehow settled effortlessly into their heads. Overall, Tallulah had a gift for teaching, in Kate's opinion. It was even fortunate that she hadn't gone into accounting. A school definitely needed people like her. Kate was only 8 years old when her mum passed away. Everything happened rather quickly. First, her mum started to lose weight and became very tired. She went to the doctor, hoping to be prescribed vitamins, so everything would return to normal. "I'll be healed by your summer vacation, and we'll go to the sea," her mother promised a worried Kate. The girl smiled back, but she was afraid of something she couldn't quite understand. Perhaps she sensed somehow that her dearest person was in trouble. The most frightening sign was that her mother stopped singing. Kate had listened to her mother's singing since birth, tender lullabies, funny songs from cartoons, and adult love ballads. Mum sang everywhere, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, sometimes even on the street, and of course at the table with guests. She had an amazingly beautiful voice, ringing, melodious, and somehow iridescent. Kate's mother had told her that since childhood she'd dreamed of being a singer, but that required studying, taking vocal lessons, maybe even attending a music school. In the orphanage where she grew up, there was no such opportunity. After graduation, Kate's mum, like other girls, went to study dressmaking. She was quite good at this too, but she had to part with her dream of the stage. What dreams could one have when the priority was providing for oneself and earning a living? Kate first heard this story when she was about 6 years old. The girl felt immense sympathy for her mother, so much that she immediately rushed to her and hugged her tightly. Mum understood everything, smiled and stroked Kate's head. "It's okay, daughter. I like sewing too, and my talent isn't lost. It was passed on to you." Kate smiled. By then, she already knew she was good. Her singing was praised by adults and kindergarten teachers alike. The music director gave Kate a solo song at every holiday performance, and the girl sang it all alone, not with the other children. She tried her best, of course, primarily for her mother, who always sat in the front row smiling happily, looking at her daughter. "You're going to be a famous singer," she often told Kate. "You'll perform on stage. Everything will work out for you if you have desire and work hard. Talent is only half of success. You have to work hard to achieve something. That's how it is in any endeavour." Kate nodded. She was ready to work, ready to study and rehearse, and she wanted it very much. They took Kate to music school when she started first grade. But they were too late. It turned out that enrolment was in spring, and her mother had brought her daughter to audition at the end of summer. There were simply no places left. "That's okay, come back next year," the administrator said, shaking his head sympathetically. "We'll definitely come," Mum promised. "And not even in the spring, but in the winter, to be sure." Plans were disrupted by Mum's sudden decline in health. Then came the diagnosis. It sounded frightening and incomprehensible. Kate couldn't grasp the gravity of the situation, but seeing her parents' pale faces and fear-filled eyes, she understood it was bad. Treatment began. Mum was rarely home now, always in hospitals. Dad visited daily, but Kate wasn't allowed to go. "You can't go there, sweetie. It's a sterile environment. When Mum's transferred to a regular room, we'll visit." After each hospital visit, Dad came home upset and sad. He seemed to age before Kate's eyes, transforming from a cheerful young man into a tired, grey one. He took time off work. Someone had to look after Kate. There were no grandparents nearby. Mum had grown up in an orphanage, and Dad's parents lived far away, having moved to help their youngest daughter with her children. Kate barely remembered them. Then, one day, Dad didn't come home from the hospital at the usual time. During her mother's illness, Kate had grown accustomed to independence. She quietly heated dinner cleaned the kitchen, then read a book about the adventures of red-haired Pippi Longstocking. Still, Dad didn't return. Kate glanced at the clock. Twilight thickened rapidly outside. It was very late. Fear gripped the girl, mostly for her father. Terrible scenarios played out in her mind. Dad hit by a car, kidnapped, or slipping on an icy pavement and losing consciousness. As night fell and a key finally turned in the lock, Kate's heart leapt. She rushed to the corridor, but on the threshold stood a confused Tallulah. Kate was usually happy to see her parents' friend, but now her appearance was so unexpected that the girl couldn't stifle a disappointed sigh. She longed to see her father. "Kate, you'll have to stay at my place tonight." "Where's Daddy?" "He's at the hospital with Mummy. He can't leave her yet." Icy fear for her mother seized Kate's heart, but she asked no questions, dreading the answers. Tallulah lived with a handsome man who resembled a Hollywood actor. He was very attentive to Kate, constantly trying to engage her in games. He was nice, but the girl wasn't in the mood for fun. Her tiny heart sensed a great misfortune. 2 days later, her father came for Kate. She barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His face was dark with blue circles under his eyes that held unbearable pain and emptiness. Kate recoiled at first, startled by her father's appearance. At home, the man broke the news. A terrible disease had taken Kate's mother. She had lost the battle, despite fighting hard. She was gone and would never return. Kate couldn't accept this. Of course she knew people sometimes die, like neighbour Katya, or the son of her father's acquaintances who was in the military and went to some conflict zone. These people just vanish. They're gone. It all seems clear enough, until it happened to Mum. The idea that there would be no more heart-to-heart talks, walks or bedtime reading was simply unbelievable. Kate cried loudly, her whole body shaking, gasping for breath. Her father stroked her head absently, unable to comfort his daughter. He, too, was grappling with the difficult loss. They say that time heals all wounds, and gradually life found a new rhythm. It wasn't as good as when Mum was alive, of course, but Kate and her father adapted to their new reality. Her grandmother came from far away. Someone had to look after Kate while her only parent was away on voyages. The girl hadn't known her grandmother before. She turned out to be a very bossy and strict woman, tall, thin, with perpetually frowning eyebrows. Her grey hair was always gathered in a tight bun, and her long fingers were constantly busy, kneading dough, cutting vegetables, dusting or knitting. Grandmother was an excellent cook. Kate had never tasted such delicious pies and tasty soups, but the elderly woman looked at her granddaughter as if she were the biggest disappointment in her life. Kate tried to please her, but never succeeded. According to grandmother, Kate had hook hands, an empty head, and legs like matchsticks. She also spoke ill of Kate's mother. Not directly, of course, but Kate understood perfectly well that Granny had disliked her. A neglected house, an ill-mannered daughter, an unattended husband, all these were criticisms of Kate's mother, and despite her young age, the girl recognised these reproaches. Once, Kate asked her grandmother to enrol her in a music school. She and her mum had planned to do this.
"Absolutely not. This school is on the other side of town and lessons are expensive. Quit this nonsense. You should have read more. It's healthier than singing songs."
"I've been told I have talent," the girl argued.
"Don't make me laugh. Talent indeed. You'd better clean your room. That's more useful and necessary than some talent."
This casual remark, which grandmother probably wouldn't even remember later, crushed Kate's self-confidence. She began to doubt her singing ability. No ear, no voice. The girl even stopped humming while doing housework, though she'd always done so before. Now Kate was ashamed to sing those so-called stupid songs. Her own voice began to sound nasty, unpleasant, and grating to her ears. Father still went on trips, and when he was away, Grandmother became the full mistress of the house. She often scolded Kate, not mincing words, calling her a dumbass for solving math incorrectly, or dumb for breaking a plate, or sewing a button crookedly to a coat.
"Why didn't your mother teach you anything?"
Grandmother would exclaim, throwing up her hands.
"My other grandchildren were serving themselves better at 3 years old,"
she'd say of her daughter's children, as if Kate weren't her granddaughter at all. Grandmother often told Kate about her cousins. They seemed like perfect children, excellent students, athletes and helpers. Grandmother told stories and held up these grandchildren as examples, constantly comparing them to Kate. These comparisons, of course, were not in Kate's favour. When her father was home, Kate could hear her grandmother reprimanding him about her. Though those conversations weren't meant for her ears, she overheard them anyway.
"Mum, give the kid a break. She's having a hard time right now, just like me. She's a good girl."
Kate understood her father was on her side, which made her feel calm and happy. But she also knew he didn't want to quarrel with his mother. Kate had grown up quickly after recent events and become much more understanding.
"Daughter, understand she does a lot for us," her father would say. "She left everything behind, her husband, her daughter, her other grandchildren, her friends and neighbours. She came here to help us."
Kate nodded obediently. She didn't want to upset her father further, so she kept her thoughts about letting Grandmother return to her favourable grandchildren unspoken. Despite the tension, there were benefits to Grandmother's stay. She taught Kate how to cook and manage the household. Kate learned to take care of her clothes, prepare meals, and manage her time. By age 10, the girl realised she no longer needed a nanny. While it was nice to have someone care for her, Grandmother's presence brought more frustration than comfort. Her remarks hurt, and even valuable advice often sounded like accusations. Kate constantly felt uneasy around her, a feeling she strongly disliked. One day, Kate talked to her father, who was also strained by his mother's communication style. Though grateful for her support during a difficult time, her moralising, attempts to educate him as an adult, and veiled reproaches about his late wife burdened him. At a family meeting, they decided Kate and her father could manage on their own. This decision was timely, as the grandmother's daughter had just had her 4th child and desperately needed help. Grandmother departed safely, surprising Kate with a goodbye kiss. Life with her father became easier and more relaxed. When he wasn't away on voyages, he managed the household. During his absences, Kate coped well enough on her own. Officially, she was under the care of their neighbour. Her teacher Tallulah also kept an eye on her, offering support when needed. Kate didn't abuse the teacher's kindness, but felt reassured, knowing help was available if necessary. Father and daughter lived this way for a year. It was a good time. They explored the region, visiting lakes, mountains, hills and forests. They toured all the local parks and campgrounds. It was fun and fascinating, though Kate regretted that her mother wasn't there to share these moments. Then Brooke entered their lives. Kate didn't immediately realise her father was seeing someone. At first, she thought he was working extra hours in the evenings. His periodic absences didn't raise suspicion, as this had happened before. Then she accidentally saw him with Brooke, and her father suddenly seemed unfamiliar, almost alien. Returning from the movies with friends one Saturday evening, Kate spotted them in the crowded park. Her father looked different, younger somehow. His eyes shone with inner joy, a wide smile on his face as he talked to his companion. The woman listened with pressed lips, as if doing Kate's father a great favour by walking beside him. Kate felt uneasy and instantly disliked the woman. Though she was a tall, statuesque blonde, stylishly dressed, her eyes were cold and icy. Kate saw no hint of genuine affection for her father, who was clearly trying to win her approval. Later, when her father brought Brooke home, Kate noticed a change. At home, Brooke skillfully wove a network of care, helpfulness, and submission, in which Kate's father became increasingly entangled. Brooke was a good cook, always serving the choicest portions to Kate's father. She went shopping with him, helped choose new clothes. Most notably, Brooke agreed with everything he said, treating each word as if it were ingenious. Kate immediately sensed Brooke's insincerity and disliked her intensely. Although Brooke tried to connect with the girl, bringing gifts like perfume, cosmetics and clothes, items that indeed interested Kate, it didn't change her feelings. Brooke's excellent taste and understanding of what a girl might like didn't make up for her perceived lack of authenticity. Kate struggled to accept this new reality. Her father had a woman in his life, and it felt like a betrayal of her mother's memory. Brooke's presence only caused Kate to feel more rejection. The girl tried to share her thoughts and feelings with Tallulah at school, visiting her teacher during free periods. Who else could she talk to? Her father, with his eyes full of love and happiness for Brooke, would hardly understand. Her friends, all from full families, couldn't relate to her situation, so it fell to Tallulah to help Kate navigate her doubts and concerns. "Yeah, I know your dad is dating Brooke," she said, shaking her head when Kate first came to her with her problem. "They were introduced by friends, mutual acquaintances of some kind. She's not nice." "Does she hurt you?" "No, but she has those eyes," Kate faltered. She couldn't find the words to explain it all to Tallulah. "Maybe you should just give Brooke some time. You'll get to know each other better, then you can draw conclusions." Kate sighed. She didn't want to get to know this woman better. She and her father had been living well on their own, but the girl understood perfectly well where everything was going, and it frightened her. She often talked with Tallulah about Brooke. The girl needed to speak out. Kate had an unpleasant and burdensome feeling about Brooke. She disliked the woman's look, the power she held over her father, and the sickeningly sweet voice she used. It was hard for Kate to see her father hugging Brooke. She wanted to run away immediately. At first, father and Brooke mostly met elsewhere, going for walks to movies and cafes. Then the woman began to appear at their home more frequently. One day, she moved her things into their house. Kate still remembered the moment when her father brought 2 huge suitcases into the apartment. The girl took a deep breath, about to ask the obvious question, but there was no need. Immediately after her father, Brooke entered the apartment. By the hand, she led Molly, her daughter, a girl 2 years younger than Kate. They were already acquainted by then, but in each other's presence, they felt nothing but mutual awkwardness. "Brooke and Molly will stay with us," the father explained. "They were urgently asked to leave their rented apartment by the owners. They're thinking of selling it, and you can't find a new one so quickly, so—" Even then, Kate realised that Brooke wouldn't be leaving them now, and so it turned out. Molly was moved into Kate's room. It was difficult. Molly turned out to be a quiet neighbour, silent and reserved. She spent most of her time in the living room watching TV and studying there. Yet Kate lost the opportunity to be alone with herself. The room was no longer her place of strength, an island of calm in this crazy world. Brooke gradually, not at once, became the full-fledged mistress of the house. Her things appeared everywhere. She decided what the family would eat for breakfast, lunch and dinner. She controlled Kate and Molly. She completely captured her father's attention, and he was overjoyed that there was finally a mistress in the house. And he didn't notice the obvious things. Kate herself overheard her father sharing his happiness on the phone with a friend. "The house is clean, always smelling of delicious food. Most importantly, Kate is looked after now. I'm at ease during my voyages. I know that my daughter isn't alone." Kate thought that without Brooke and Molly she had been doing well on her own. But to change father's mind, no, she wasn't going to do that, because she realised it was useless. Father had finally shifted the lion's share of his responsibilities to another adult. Now he didn't have to worry about 1,000 household trifles. Brooke took it all on herself. Oh, and he must have loved her, after all. His looks spoke of it. Kate found it unpleasant to see her father hugging Brooke, and the compliments he paid her made her feel nauseous. They got married in the end, about 2 months after Brooke and Molly moved in. The event was celebrated with a close circle, the 4 of them, a couple of Brooke's girlfriends and a friend of her father's. They sat in a restaurant and had dinner. The adults made toasts, endless speeches about how now they had a real family. Mother, father, 2 children. It was idyllic. Father thought so, but he didn't notice, or just didn't want to notice, the important details. Brooke didn't like Kate. Of course, she didn't have to have sincere feelings for her, but it wasn't even a matter of indifference. This woman had a dislike for her husband's daughter, which she tried not to demonstrate. But Kate read everything perfectly well. She wasn't a little girl. Brooke was annoyed by everything her stepdaughter did. How she ate, talked, dressed, how she cleaned or cooked. The girl's very existence seemed to be something unpleasant, disgusting, undesirable for her. Kate felt this attitude. Sometimes Brooke allowed herself to comment on her spouse's daughter. "You dress like a boy," Brooke would say, curling her lips contemptuously at the sight of Kate's eternal jeans and sweatshirts. "And you should have gone to the hairdresser a long time ago." It could still be considered concern about the stepdaughter's appearance, but everything else, Brooke was irritated by literally everything Kate did. She called her singing a useless waste of time and advised the girl to focus more on her textbooks. If Kate watched TV in her free time, she was immediately labelled as lazy. The condition of the girl's room was also constantly criticised by Brooke. She reprimanded Kate for the dust on the windowsills, for scattered things, for the mess on her shelves in the closet. And all this, of course, was also served under the guise of caring for the poor orphan, whose early departed mother hadn't had time to bring her up properly. And also, like a true stepmother, Brooke favoured her own daughter. It wasn't very conspicuous, but Kate noticed, of course. Once, the girl even had to endure a tedious lecture from Brooke because she ate the last yoghurt from the refrigerator. It turns out that it was for the child, that is, for Molly, the youngest member of the family. Sometimes Kate wanted to cry from resentment and helplessness. She felt like a stranger in her own home. Brooke and Molly gradually became the main people in the apartment, and she and her father, it was as if they were pushed out somewhere, erased. The saddest thing was that her father didn't notice any of this. He quietly went away on his trips, and when he returned, he felt incredibly happy. It was as if Brooke had bewitched him. That nasty Brooke. It was useless to talk to him, and Kate, as usual, poured out her soul to Tallulah. She looked at the girl with sad eyes, sometimes stroking her blonde hair, which was especially comforting. "Well, I understand you, of course. It must be very hard and hurtful for you," Tallulah said, propping her chin up with her fists and looking the girl straight in the eyes. "Only it all sounds as if Brooke were just trying to bring you up, to take care of you." "She hates me," Kate argued. "You should see the way she looks at me, like I'm a nasty spider or some slimy centipede." You've always had a vivid imagination, Tallulah smiled. Yes, I understand. You're a sensitive girl. You must have good reasons for your judgment. If Brooke ever hits you, or directly insults you, tell me at once, all right? Okay, Kate nodded sorrowfully. The girl knew that Tallulah was going through a difficult time herself. She had recently ended a relationship with a man she had hoped to start a family with. Kate didn't know the details, only overhearing adults discussing the situation. Meanwhile, Kate struggled to endure Brooke's constant nagging and dislike. But what troubled her even more was her clear understanding that Brooke was with her father purely for selfish reasons. Kate was mature enough to recognize this, and it baffled her how her father couldn't see something so obvious. Brooke hailed from a tiny, remote village, a true backwater. Her mother still lived there in a house Brooke disdainfully called a shack. Ambitious, Brooke dreamed of escaping her rural roots, yearning for city life. She saw marriage as her only ticket out, believing that achieving success on her own would take too long. First, you'd have to study, then work your way up. A whole life could slip by that way, she thought. In the city, Brooke rented a room in a dormitory and became a shop assistant supervisor. The job required no special skills or education, allowing her to work comfortably while scouting for a suitable fiancé who could provide her with a comfortable life. Brooke had a series of relationships, both serious and casual. She ended some herself, deeming the men unpromising or unsuccessful, while others left her. Eventually, Brooke believed she had hit the jackpot. She managed to get pregnant by the director of a grocery store. The man was pleasant and seemingly responsible. They married, and Brooke moved into a spacious 3-bedroom apartment, just as she had always dreamed. She had married into a good family. Her father-in-law was the chief doctor at the local dental clinic, and her mother-in-law was the chief accountant. The in-laws naturally had hoped for a more suitable match for their only boy and made no secret of their disapproval of Brooke. However, her husband was infatuated with his chosen one and fiercely defended her to his parents. Brooke, for her part, didn't argue with her in-laws. Instead, she tried her best to please them, understanding that the favour of such influential people could only benefit her. Their first child didn't survive. Midway through the pregnancy, Brooke went into premature labour. The boy was tiny and weak, not yet ready for life outside the womb. Despite efforts to save him, he didn't make it. Brooke was devastated, walking around in a daze. Everyone sympathised with the bereaved mother. Her father-in-law arranged for Brooke to recuperate at a special clinic. While Brooke genuinely grieved for her child, she also lamented that her position in the family remained precarious. A child would have given her leverage, allowing her to dictate terms to her new relatives. Now what? At the clinic, Brooke quickly regained her spirits, so much so that she began a passionate affair with a handsome masseur. He was brutish, funny, and oozed charisma, resembling a Hollywood actor. Compared to this Adonis, Brooke's husband seemed dull and unimpressive. Brooke returned home pregnant once again, but not by her husband. Unwilling to terminate it, she decided to pass off the child as her husband's. Molly was born right on schedule, but the family believed she was about 6 weeks premature. Initially, the family doted on the girl. The in-laws became frequent shoppers at children's stores, and Brooke's husband transformed into a doting, tender father. However, when Molly was 4, the truth came to light. Her father-in-law suggested the family undergo a new medical examination, requiring only a blood sample. The test would reveal not just current illnesses, but also predispositions to various ailments. Brooke didn't suspect a thing. When the results arrived, everyone was healthy, with no serious threats looming. But it also revealed that Molly had a blood type she couldn't have inherited from her parents. A scandal erupted. The indoors cornered Brooke, threatening legal action, demanding DNA analysis. Knowing her husband's parents were influential and capable of following through, Brooke barely put up a fight. In the end, Brooke and Molly were left with nothing. She had to divorce her husband, receiving no property settlement for herself or her daughter. The in-laws had seen to that. Brooke hated them bitterly, but realised she and her daughter meant nothing to them now. She had deceived them, after all. Brooke had to move back into the same dormitory room, now with a child in tow. Despite everything, Brooke loved Molly. Her daughter was her beacon of hope for a better future. The girl had grown to be beautiful, inheriting good looks from both Brooke and her biological father, the handsome masseur from the clinic. Brooke envisioned Molly growing into a woman of incredible beauty, one with every chance of marrying well. If Molly became wealthy, Brooke would benefit too. So, from an early age, Brooke groomed her daughter to seek a rich husband. Kate often overheard Brooke's lectures and felt sorry for Molly, sensing the unfairness of it all. Men love beautiful, easygoing, cheerful, and compliant women, Brooke instructed her daughter. They appreciate femininity. No man will look twice at a girl in baggy sweaters and torn jeans, let alone one without makeup and a proper hairstyle. In these words, Kate sensed a hint about her own appearance, but she didn't care much. Surprisingly, she felt some sympathy for Molly. Brooke undoubtedly loved her daughter, but she also intended to use her for her own purposes. There was no doubt about that either. In general, it was hard for Brooke and her daughter to live alone without a man's support. They scrimped on everything. Several times, Brooke tried her usual scheme, to leave with wealthier men. However, having a child sharply lowered her status in the marriage market. Moreover, because of Molly, Brooke had to be much pickier. She couldn't allow any of her beaux to mistreat her daughter. Several relationships Brooke had between her divorce and meeting Kate's father ended fruitlessly. Finally, a friend introduced her to a promising widower. He lived in a spacious apartment in the city centre, earned well and needed a woman to manage household chores and look after his daughter. Perfect. Brooke solved his problems, lack of money and cramped living conditions. True, she acquired a whole set of responsibilities, but she had 2 almost grown-up girls at her disposal. The main thing was to organise everything properly. The girls would benefit and so would she. Soon Brooke realised she had overestimated her strength. Initially, she considered the presence of a child with a potential spouse a positive. If not for this girl, Kate's father would have long ago found a young and beautiful companion. Not everyone would agree to such a burden. The chosen one's gratitude would be greater if she cared for his child. Stronger relationship, more power over the man, but it wasn't as easy as originally planned. The man's child was annoying. Kate pieced together Brooke's story from various sources. Some details came from her stepmother herself, others from Molly. But the most interesting information came from overheard conversations between Brooke and her friend Lorraine. They often talked on the phone. Brooke closed the bedroom door to feel more free, but the apartment walls were thin. Brooke was frank with her friend, revealing her true feelings and confirming what Kate had long suspected. Yes, it turned out that Brooke was with her father only for the money and the apartment. Yes, her husband's daughter annoyed her to the point of teeth-grinding. But it didn't matter. Kate would soon grow up and leave for the college in another city, and the husband was constantly travelling. Then Brooke and Molly would live like queens. The unseen Lorraine seemed to agree with Brooke on everything and actively supported her. That was Kate's impression anyway. Sometimes Brooke said terrible things to her friend on the phone. "How I wish they would suddenly vanish, he and his wild daughter. Then me and Molly would be alone in their apartment. That would be happiness." These words gave Kate goosebumps. Her stepmother dreamed that Kate and her father would disappear from the face of the earth and stop interfering with her and her daughter's life in their apartment, while her dad looked at his wife with loving eyes and considered her a kind and caring woman. But there were also pleasant moments in Kate's life. A few hours each weekday, she stayed home alone. Brooke worked until 6, and Molly would dash off to dance at 4. It was Brooke who insisted on choreography for her daughter. After all, wealthy men pay attention to graceful women with good figures. Therefore, Brooke considered dancing a necessity for her girl from a young age. During these few hours alone, Kate could do what she truly enjoyed. How impatiently she looked forward to these moments, and how frustrated she felt when something disrupted her plans. Like now. Kate thought she still had plenty of time for another online class. She had stumbled upon a vocal course from a famous singer online just a couple of months ago and immediately realised it was precisely what she needed. The girl recalled her passion for singing and her dream of shining on board. Even though she was already 15 and likely starting late, Kate understood that successful singers usually begin at an early age. Still, vocal lessons brought her incomparable pleasure. She learned proper breathing, how to hit difficult notes, and new singing techniques. She had figured out some things on her own earlier, but this singer, who decided to launch a free vocal training course, taught her a lot more. Of course, Kate practiced only when home alone. She was shy in front of Molly, her father, or especially Brooke, and they didn't approve of her hobbies at home, calling them silly and nonsensical. Today, Kate could barely wait for her stepsister to leave for dance class. She had just opened the website with the course on her laptop when she heard that nasty creak of the key in the door and Brooke's disgruntled voice. "Why haven't you taken out the trash yet?" As if her precious little daughter couldn't grab the bag on her way to dance class. Kate sighed heavily. Brooke probably had a short day at work, so she showed up earlier than usual. Well, she would have to change her plans for today. "I'll take out the trash," Kate said. Trouble came when they least expected it. One frosty February morning, her father once again left on a trip. Traditionally, Kate went to see him off at the door. A few years ago, Brooke and Molly always woke up to hug the head of the family goodbye, to wish him a happy and easy journey. But that had been long ago. Now, Brooke preferred not to disturb her sleep, and Molly followed suit, of course. Kate understood what was going on. Brooke was slowly dropping her act. At first, she had tried to seem perfect to her father, loving, caring, hard-working. Now he was firmly on the hook, and there was no need for any unnecessary effort. Her father justified her stepmother's behaviour. "Come on, daughter," he gently rebuked Kate when she tried to draw attention to this fact. She's tired from work and home duties. Let her sleep a little longer. You know how important a good night's sleep is. And you don't need to be up so early. I can leave on my own, you know." But Kate still saw her father off every time. When the door slammed behind him, her heart clenched longingly. Once again, she would have to live at the mercy of her evil stepmother. With her father around, the stepmother managed to restrain herself somewhat, but without him, Kate mentally willed time to pass faster, so her father would return sooner. That February morning, Daddy hugged Kate goodbye as usual. The girl breathed in his familiar comforting scent, a mixture of cologne, tobacco smoke, and diesel oil. It was her favourite smell, soothing and reassuring. "You're all grown up," her father said, shaking his head. "You're like a young lady already. When I come back, I'll take you and Molly shopping for clothes. It's time to dress you up for spring." Kate smiled. Her father tried not to differentiate between her and Molly. If he bought something tasty for his daughter, he would be sure to get the same for Brooke's daughter. If he planned to update Kate's wardrobe, he'd buy clothes for Molly too. Yet Kate sensed that her father loved her more, and it pleased her. At least she didn't feel the agony of jealousy. "Come back soon, Dad," Kate pleaded. "I can't, sweetheart. You know we're going north. It's a long, hard journey." "Well, then take your time, but be careful, okay?"
Don't worry, Kate. I've got plenty of experience, and I'm always careful.
As the door closed behind her father, goosebumps ran down Kate's back. She wrapped herself tighter in the plaid hanging over her skinny shoulders. Something made her feel uneasy. Everything seemed normal, yet not quite. Kate suddenly realized that they had never discussed the dangers of his job before his departures, and now she had asked him to be careful. For some reason, the girl regretted not telling her dad how much she loved him. Dad was due back in 2 weeks. They called every day. He told his daughter about the places he was passing through and showed her beautiful photos. Kate loved seeing these pictures from his trips. She hadn't visited many places herself, but her father had travelled almost all over the country. Sometimes it felt to Kate as if she were travelling with him, so detailed were his descriptions of his adventures, complete with videos and photos. Her father was supposed to return in 2 weeks, but he was brought back to his hometown much earlier. Something happened that Kate had feared so much she didn't even want to think about, trying her best to keep anxious thoughts at bay. And now it had happened. It was a common accident. A truck veered into the oncoming lane and crashed into her father's vehicle. The collision was powerful, but both drivers were saved only because their vehicles were sturdy and strong, yet the drivers were badly hurt. Brooke received the alarming news from her father's colleagues. It was early morning, and the apartment was in its usual bustle. Brooke was getting ready for work while Kate and Molly prepared for school. "Let's get a move on! You're crawling like sleepy flies!" Brooke shouted at the girls. "Kate, did you read late again?" "Okay if it's something educational, but it's probably that nonsense about obscure pop singers again." Kate blushed to the roots of her hair and once again felt guilty, as if reading magazines with biographies of pop singers from different eras was terribly shameful. Then Brooke's cell phone vibrated in her hand. The woman looked at it irritably, muttering, "Who needs to call at such a time? We're all running late as it is." In the next instant, Brooke's haughty, contemptuous expression fled. She gasped, clamped her hand over her mouth and turned pale. Molly didn't notice, still trying in vain to find 2 matching socks in the laundry basket. But Kate realized with some inner instinct that something was wrong. Something had happened to her father. "How?" Brooke's usually firm, determined voice trembled slightly. "How did this happen? What's wrong with him?" Molly finally looked up from her search and stared at her mother with interest. Brooke listened to the caller, occasionally asking questions: where he was, how serious his injuries were, what the prognosis was. Finally, Brooke ended the call and sank powerlessly into a nearby chair. "What happened?" Kate asked. She was scared to hear the answer, but she had to know. "Dad was in a car accident, through no fault of his own. They say he's injured, but he's alive. He's in intensive care in the town near where the accident occurred." "Let's go there!" Kate exclaimed. Tears immediately sprang to her eyes. She couldn't believe what Brooke had just said. It was frightening to imagine her father in a hospital bed, his head covered with bandages, bruised all over, and probably connected to various machines. "No, we're not going anywhere yet." Brooke shook her head. "What's the point? They won't let us into the intensive care unit anyway. Once he's stabilised and transferred to our local hospital, then we'll visit him." Is he badly hurt?" "It's not clear yet. The doctors aren't giving away any prognosis, but they say he'll live." He'll live. These words gave Kate hope that everything would end well. She couldn't bear the thought of being alone in this world. Brooke and Molly didn't count. That day, Kate didn't go to school. Brooke allowed her to stay home. The girl wasn't able to focus in class anyway. Molly also wanted to skip, but Brooke stopped her daughter's attempts to play hooky. Molly reluctantly obeyed. She had recently been in big trouble. Brooke was called to school due to Molly's endless absences. The girl was almost transferred to a remedial school, but Kate's father intervened. He greased some palms and bought some gifts. Tallulah, as his old friend, also helped in her own way. Molly stayed in school, but under strict conditions, no more absences. When Tallulah learned what happened to Kate's father, she immediately took her to that town. "Brooke says they won't let us into the intensive care unit," Kate remarked. "They will," Tallulah answered confidently. "The main thing is desire. Are you with me?" "Of course." Kate went with Tallulah. Brooke wasn't happy about this trip. Why bother a sick man for nothing? You'll just bring more germs to the ICU, as if he doesn't have enough problems. But that evening, Kate overheard Brooke's conversation with Lorraine. "Can you believe it? This Tallulah is going to the town to see him, and she's bringing the girl. It turns out that I, the legal wife, am more indifferent than some childhood friend. It's not okay, right?" "Yeah, you're right, Lorraine. I guess she really wants to make me look bad in front of my husband. Or both of them. Both Kate and Tallulah. Look who really loves you, and who's just... And I have a job, by the way. I can't drop everything for him. The world doesn't revolve around one person." Kate wanted to burst into the room and shout that Tallulah also had work, and she, Kate, had studies. But if a person is dear to them, they'll sacrifice their own affairs to visit. That's human. And Brooke, of course, was just making excuses, because she didn't love Kate's father and never had. Brooke wasn't even worried about his condition. No, she was afraid of losing a source of income, but her heart certainly didn't ache for her husband. Of course, Kate didn't comfort Brooke. It was useless to talk to her, and there was no point in quarrelling. Let things continue as they were. The trip to the town turned out to be a huge shock. Until Kate saw her father, she thought everything wasn't so bad, or rather, she wanted to believe it. That's why she convinced herself that Daddy would heal quickly and be as good as new. But when she saw her parent in the hospital bed, she realized he wouldn't recover quickly, if at all. His eyes were surrounded by deep, bluish-black circles covering half his face. His nose was swollen, his eyes puffy, and his whole body was wrapped in bandages, with spots of what might have been blood or iodine peeking through. Seeing Tallulah and Kate, her father tried to smile. He couldn't. The man wanted to say something, but no sound came from his throat. "He has a tube there," the nurse explained. "Without it he can't breathe, and with it, it's almost impossible to speak. Give him time. His speech will come back. It will." Not only could her father not speak, he couldn't move. This man, who a week ago had seemed like a rock to Kate, now looked so confused and defenceless that the girl broke down in tears. She cried from fear, from pain, from pity for her loved one. Tallulah pressed the sobbing girl to herself with one hand, while the other gently patted her father's shoulder. Then came a conversation with the doctor. He was a young man with a deliberately aloof manner. "Well, what can I tell you? By the way, are you the patient's spouse?" Tallulah hesitated, then nodded. Later she explained to Kate that it was necessary. Doctors usually only talk to relatives of patients. If Tallulah had admitted she was just a childhood friend, they probably would have been kicked out of the ward. Kate, though a relative, was still a minor, and Tallulah was technically a stranger. "A spouse, then," the doctor said, shaking his head. "Well, you should know the whole truth. Your husband will survive. We've stabilized his vital signs. We'll be sending him home soon. Well, to the local hospital for now, for treatment. They'll give you more details there. But, prepare to have a disabled man at home. It's hopeless." "Really?" Tallulah gasped. He never complained about his health. He was strong, athletic. That's why he survived. But his brain is damaged. Motor functions are affected. It's a very delicate situation. Maybe the local doctors can do something for him, but I doubt it very much. I did everything I had to. I pulled him back from the grave. I saved your husband's life. He could be crippled. Can you imagine? Brooke sobbed into the phone a few days ago. Of course, she was talking to Lorraine again, and Kate heard every word. No one was hiding anything from her. What am I supposed to do with him? Cook his meals? Wipe his nose? Help him use the toilet? I didn't sign up for that. I'd rather he... Kate tensed up. A word was about to break from Brooke's lips, after which the girl would not be able to restrain herself any longer, and she would burst into her stepmother's bedroom and cling to her hair. But Brooke did not finish her sentence. Lorraine seemed to be calming her down. Brooke was sobbing, arguing. I can't bear it. Do you understand? I can't bear it. We need to get a divorce before it's too late. Lorraine seemed to be urging her friend not to rush. Maybe you're right. I shouldn't be hasty. We'll see. Everything might work itself out. Maybe things aren't as bad with him as they seem at first glance. After a while, the father was transferred to the local hospital. Kate visited him during visiting hours. Brooke came too, but less frequently. She adopted a wait-and-see approach, neither pushing her husband away nor showing much warmth. She hadn't yet decided how to proceed. Father's condition improved. The terrible bruises on his face faded. His fractures healed, and the tube that had prevented him from speaking was removed from his throat. He could now breathe on his own and even communicate with Kate. Fortunately, his cognitive functions remained intact. He spoke coherently and remembered and understood everything. However, movement was still a significant issue. He couldn't move his arm or leg. The body itself is fine, the attending physician explained to Kate and Brooke when her father was first transferred. He was a man with striking eyes, foxy long, light green and attentive. We'll repair the body, but as time passes, the chances diminish. Chances? Brooke asked, alarmed. The same question was on Kate's mind. There's a possibility, the doctor continued. There's a neurosurgeon in the capital who handles such complicated cases. The only one in the country. He could help, but... But what? Brooke interrupted impatiently. It requires a substantial amount of money, the doctor finished. This treatment isn't covered by insurance. It's considered an experimental technique. How much is needed? Well, I can't give you an exact figure right now. If you'd like, I can contact the medical centre, gather the information, and provide you with the amount in, say, 2 days. Kate returned home that day in high spirits. It seemed a solution had been found. If such a doctor existed, even if he was the only one in the country, it meant that Daddy would definitely become healthy and strong again, just like before. On the appointed day, Brooke went to the hospital alone. She didn't take Kate, saying the conversation would be heavy and serious, not for children's ears. Kate tried to argue. She was 15, hardly a child, but Brooke was adamant. She returned from the hospital with a stony face. Well? Kate rushed to her. It won't work. The woman shook her head. Why not? That surgeon, he won't perform the operation. It's a hopeless case. Kate felt as if the world around her suddenly faded. Her legs turned to cotton, and multicoloured dots flickered before her eyes. She retreated to her room to bury her face in her pillow and cry out her grief. She had placed so much hope in this neurosurgeon, imagining herself and her father walking through the park chatting. And now this. That same evening, Kate inadvertently overheard a conversation between Brooke and Lorraine. She never eavesdropped intentionally. It often made her uncomfortable, but the apartment walls were thin. "You won't believe how much he charged for the treatment," Brooke exclaimed. "Guess! More! 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 I'd have to sell my apartment to pay for it all. And the results? They'd be there, but maybe not that impressive. I mean, he'd be better off. So yeah, that's what I did. I told everyone the neurosurgeon refused to take him on. I mean, where's the money coming from? It's not like selling the apartment is an option. Where would we live then?" Kate felt rage begin to boil inside her. So, Brooke deceived her again. It's not that the doctor refused to help father. It's just that a lot of money is needed and Brooke is clinging to an apartment that doesn't even belong to her. Not yet. That's how she decided everything, without consulting anyone. She determined the fate of her father and his property. "No! What are you saying? I beg you. What kind of nurse am I? Can you imagine me in such a role? In fact, I've got it all worked out. As soon as he's discharged, he'll go straight to a care home. There are special ones for the disabled. We'll have to pay a lot, but that's okay. We have the apartment. My salary, Kate's survivor's pension. It's better this way than looking after a bedridden man or wandering around in rented rooms. Yes, Lorraine, you're right. That's how smart I am." Kate burst into her stepmother's room before she could finish talking to her friend. Brooke's eyes widened as she looked at her furious stepdaughter. Apparently Kate's face was quite striking. But in the next moment, Brooke regained her composure. Her face assumed its usual expression, contemptuous and haughty. The face she reserved for Kate. Brooke had a whole arsenal of masks at her disposal. "Lorraine, I'll call you back," Brooke said slowly to her friend and finally ended the call. "I heard everything," Kate continued, trying to remain calm. Her heart was pounding frantically, her thoughts scattering like frightened birds. But she, like Brooke, tried to appear cool and collected, having realised it was the best tactic. "So what? Let's say you overheard my conversation and know everything. Who will benefit from that? You can't do anything about it anyway, and my version would make everyone feel better." "What do you mean, there's nothing that can be done?" Kate protested. "You said yourself that the cost of the treatment equals the cost of the apartment. Let's sell the apartment and cure Dad. He'll earn money for a new one when he's healthy." "Child, you know nothing about life, so you're talking nonsense." Brooke's voice turned steely. "Well, let's say we sell this apartment. Then what? Where are we going to live?" "We can rent something. I'll stay with Tallulah temporarily, and you and Molly can find a place. You lived somewhere before you married my father." These words had a powerful effect. Brooke leapt from the bed and charged at Kate, hissing angrily like an enraged goose. "Can you even imagine what it's like to live in a dorm, with alcoholics and outcasts as neighbours? With a shared kitchen, bathroom and toilet for the whole floor? Are you going to Tallulah? As if she needs you. She'll kick you out of the dorm too, and you'll live there in 12 square metres with cockroaches." "I don't care. Daddy needs to be cured." Kate stood her ground, boldly meeting her stepmother's gaze. "We have to take every chance we can." "The doctor said there will be a result, but not 100%. He won't be able to work anymore. So do you think he'll thank you for depriving him of his home? You think it'll be easy for a sick, disabled man with a family in a dormitory? Just try to imagine it." "Let him live in a dormitory," Kate shook her head, "but not in a home for the people with disabilities. I don't think he'd be better off there than with his own family. I hear you're going to put him in there." "I am," said Brooke, her eyes still blazed with malice. There was so much hatred in them. Maybe it wasn't all meant for Kate. Perhaps it was anger at the world, at fate itself, at how circumstances had turned out. "Of course, you don't know what it's like to care for a bedridden patient at home, but I do. When my grandmother was sick, my mother took care of her, and it was hell. I can't, and I don't want to. And I'm not going to ruin my, your, and Molly's lives." That was too much. Brooke was trying to justify her intentions by claiming to care for her children. It was incomprehensible. "Daddy can be cured. We need to sell the apartment," Kate insisted. "You're stubborn and don't understand anything at all. Well, all right. In any case, no one will let us sell the apartment. There are 2 minors registered here, you and Molly. No one will allow us to worsen your living conditions, fortunately." Kate pondered this, realizing it might be true. The law could probably be circumvented somehow, but Brooke, of course, would never do it. Kate had long ago realized that her stepmother was bound to her father by purely selfish interests, and now it was crystal clear. Brooke had clung to the apartment like a bulldog, and she would never give up. Kate was still too young and weak to compete with such a formidable rival. The girl suddenly whirled around and fled the room. She snatched her down jacket in the hallway, threw it over her shoulders, slipped her feet into her sneakers and bolted out the door. Kate sat in Tallulah's cosy kitchen, sipping mint tea from a beautiful cup. The teacher, seated opposite her guest, looked at the girl sympathetically. Having quarrelled with her stepmother, Kate suddenly realised she could no longer stay near that monster. And where could she run to? Only to Tallulah. The girl haltingly told the teacher everything. Her hope for her father's healing, the moonlit conversation, the quarrel with Brooke. Tallulah listened attentively, her eyes full of pity and pain. "So, he can be cured," Tallulah mused when Kate had finished. It seemed that, out of the whole story, only this news had truly touched her. "Well, yes, but it's costly." "I'll go to the hospital tomorrow. I was planning to visit your father anyway, and I'll find out more." Tallulah kept her word and learned everything. Indeed, there was a chance for Kate's father's recovery, but the required sum was considerable. Money from selling a spacious apartment in the city centre would be enough. However, if Tallulah were to sell her one-room apartment, it wouldn't suffice. "But, nevertheless, I did put my apartment up for sale," the woman said, gazing thoughtfully past Kate. They were in an empty school office. Kate had dropped in on her favourite teacher after school to hear what she had learned from the doctors. "For sale?" Kate gasped in surprise. "Well, yes, of course. It's not the whole amount, but at least something. We have to act fast. The doctor said that time is working against the patient here. The sooner the surgery is done, the more functions will be restored, and vice versa." Where will you live?" Kate couldn't believe her ears. Yes, she knew that Tallulah was very fond of their whole family, but such an act was simply priceless. "I'll go back to my parents if need be. And actually, I hope that I won't have to sell it. I've already applied to a special fund that collects money for surgeries for sick people. Maybe they'll help your dad." Kate hugged her teacher tightly. She was so clever, so kind. She had thought to apply to the fund. Why hadn't Brooke considered this idea? All the stepmother's energy was directed only at finding the ideal solution for herself, and such a solution was found. It was only necessary to shove a severely disabled man into the nursing home. Then she could live happily in his comfortable, spacious apartment. But the fundraiser, which was opened at Tallulah's request, unfortunately progressed very slowly. People preferred to help small children. Adult men aroused little pity and sympathy. Perhaps stereotypes were at work here. All of Kate's thoughts were now consumed by one thing: where to get the money. What could she do? A 15-year-old girl, she couldn't even get a job once her age was known. But Kate tried. She wanted to be a waitress in a bar. She was willing to scrub floors, anything to be able to put money aside for her father's operation. But everywhere the girl was rejected. Kate couldn't bear to look at Brooke during this time. Her stepmother played the role of a miserable victim, deliberately eliciting pity from all acquaintances. And it worked. Brooke presented her husband's situation in such a way that people advised her to send him to a special institution where such people would be better off. One evening after school, Kate walked past the fancy restaurant. It was a beautiful building. Long ago, her parents had attended a wedding there and described it as a magical place with columns, paintings and fountains. Those were good times, calm and prosperous. Kate felt the love and care of her healthy, strong parents, believing it would last forever. Obeying an inner impulse, Kate entered the restaurant. She wanted to see with her own eyes what her parents had described. Though many years had passed and much could have changed, Kate saw the columns and fountains. Small illuminated fountains were set far apart in the spacious lobby, with beautiful fish swimming in them. It really does look like a magical place, Kate thought, just as my parents said. Amazing. Are you here for the anniversary? A young man in an elegant tuxedo asked the mesmerized Kate. He clearly worked at the restaurant, probably as an administrator. Without knowing why, Kate nodded. The man smiled benevolently. Then you're in this room. Kate followed his direction. The huge hall was filled with festively set round tables. Dressed-up people sat laughing and talking. Soft music played, and there was a steady hum, like a beehive. You're a singer? An anxious girl in ripped jeans and a crumpled grey t-shirt rushed up to Kate. Surprised by the question, Kate answered in bewilderment. Yes, a singer, but... Then what are you waiting for? I'm exhausted. The girl grabbed Kate's arm and dragged her away, talking non-stop. I was told the singer would be young, but I didn't think so young. You look like a baby. You know that? Kate nodded. She did still consider herself a child. Confused about where the girl was taking her, Kate asked, Where are we going? Are you going to perform like that? The girl looked Kate over from head to toe. They were standing in a small dark room, having climbed a low ladder to get there. Well, I actually... No, it's okay. The days of lavish concert costumes are over, and you look fine. It's youthful. Well, God bless you. The girl pushed the bewildered Kate onto the stage. Blinded by the bright spotlights, Kate found herself facing about 200 guests. It was overwhelming. A young man in a bright green sequined jacket, apparently the event's entertainer, suddenly shoved a microphone into Kate's hands. A real microphone, heavy and rough. Please welcome our young guest. She will now perform the Jubilee's favourite song. The hall erupted in applause and cheers as the music began to play. Luckily, Kate knew this cheerful composition, popular about 30 years ago. She suddenly realised what was expected of her. She had been mistaken for the hired singer. Kate had once dreamed of this. A microphone, a stage, an audience. Now it had come true in such an unexpected way. She would do her best not to disappoint these people, hoping her voice wouldn't fail her after so long. Kate took a deep breath, opened her mouth, and... No, her voice didn't let her down. She performed the song perfectly, inspiring many guests to dance. Kate felt she was sending energy into the hall, which immediately returned to her, multiplied. Her skin tingled with these elastic waves, giving her confidence and making her want to sing even better, to bring more joy and pleasure to the audience. What Kate felt at that moment was indescribable. As the final chords sounded, The hall erupted in deafening applause. Kate stood, smiling, a little dumbfounded by her own success. At that moment she realised the stage was her dream, her love, her destiny. Suddenly, someone's strong hand pulled her back into the dark room from which she had emerged. It was the girl in the ripped jeans, looking confused. "Why did you lie about being a singer?" "I am a singer." "I see, you did a great job. But I was expecting another girl, Hannah. Maybe you've heard of her. Our local celebrity?" Kate nodded. Of course she knew Hannah and even followed her on social media. "Well, there you go. Everyone knows her but me, it seems. And I made a mistake. They said young and beautiful blonde, and here you are. So I got confused." Kate smiled again. "Yeah, it's a funny situation, but it's great that it turned out like this." "Hannah was late, but she's already here, so it's her turn to sing now. And you, come with me. We need to talk." On the way out, the girl in ripped jeans introduced herself as Jennifer. She worked at the restaurant as a hostess. Jennifer led her into a cramped office. A desk piled with papers stood in front of the window. A tall shelf lined the wall, and a pot with a thin tree occupied the corner. That was all that fit in the small space. "Sit down," Jennifer motioned to a stool, and then sat in a chair at the table. "So, Kate, how long have you been practicing vocals?" Kate pondered the question. She had never practiced professionally, but she had been singing for herself all her life, probably. "A long time," the girl nodded finally. "It shows. You've got quite a voice. Are you over 18? Kate suddenly felt a pang of regret at her youth. But lying would be pointless. The truth would come out anyway. "No, I'm 15. Jennifer rolled her eyes. "What am I going to do with such a young talent?" "Okay, the main thing is that you already have a passport, so you can work at least a few hours a day. The law allows it. Are you ready? I want to sign a contract with you. You'll sing here sometimes. The boss will pay you well. Don't doubt it. For a voice like yours, we have a decent audience. And the guards look out for the staff's safety, so don't let your parents worry. How's that?" Kate smiled happily, breathless with unexpected joy. This was beyond her wildest dreams. Since Kate's first performance on stage, her life had taken a sharp turn. Good fortune seemed to pour down on her, as if from a horn of plenty. First, she was now singing on stage. Brooke's permission had been needed. She initially resisted, but Tallulah intervened. Kate didn't know how the teacher managed to convince her stepmother, but she did. Brooke signed the consent. Kate felt in her element. She sang with soul, and people responded with gratitude. It was heartening to see how the music and singing touched the listeners. The faces of the restaurant visitors became more beautiful, almost spiritualized. It was a kind of magic. Secondly, the fundraising for her father's treatment was progressing slowly but surely. People transferred small amounts, but there were many of these kind souls. In a couple of weeks, a quarter of the sum was collected. Tallulah admitted that at first she hadn't believed in the success, but now she was elated, watching the growing numbers. Kate transferred every penny she earned at the restaurant to the same account. Brooke grumbled that the girl should buy new clothes for herself because the old ones were too small. But in their situation, it wasn't worth wasting money. They needed to save and, if possible, think about the future. Kate paid no attention to her muttering. Her stepmother's words had ceased to matter much to her. Father was also improving. His condition was getting better, and the doctors were even talking about discharge. However, right after the hospital, he would have to go to a care home. Kate desperately wanted to prevent this, so she worked, saved, and hoped. Tallulah also sent the money she received from tutoring to the account. Kate was grateful to her for this. The teacher had even put her apartment up for sale. Sometimes people came to view it, looked at the rooms, shook their heads and left. So far, no one had expressed a desire to buy her place. Still, there wasn't enough money. A considerable amount was missing, and time was running out. The doctors warned the longer it took, the less effective the operation would be, and that was frightening. One day, after the usual evening performance, an excited Jennifer came to Kate. "Listen, someone wants to talk to you. Oh, he might take you away from us." "What a loss, but you need money. We know everything, so keep your fingers crossed." Kate couldn't make sense of her colleague's rambling. Jennifer, when worried, expressed herself in a confusing manner. Kate found herself back in Jennifer's office. At a desk sat a smiling young man, pleasant, handsome, stylishly and expensively dressed. He had very attentive, intelligent eyes, dark as the deep night. "It's a pleasure to see you like this, not on the stage," said the man. "My name is Sydney, and I feel now as if I've accidentally found a treasure." Kate smiled. "What a funny comparison. Am I this treasure?" Sydney turned out to be a producer. When he said his last name, Kate gasped. Of course, she had heard of him. He was a prominent figure in show business. But what was he doing in their city? How did he end up here? Sydney lived and worked in the capital. He had his own studio and simultaneously developed several projects. One particularly popular and successful project was a talent show on TV. Kate herself sometimes watched it when she had time. Children and teenagers from all over the country travelled to the capital to perform in this show. The prize was huge, plus contracts with famous producers and training with real stars, the ones that appeared on screen every day. Kate's head spun when she heard Sydney's proposal. "I invite you to the new season of our show. I'm sure you'll be a success. I have an eye for talent. Even if you don't take first prize, you'll be noticed. Do you understand? They won't just let you go. You're a talented girl. You belong on stage. You were born to shine and give people light." Kate nodded slowly. Sydney had almost repeated her mum's words. The dizziness passed. Her head cleared. She suddenly realised this was a chance, a real chance, to get the missing sum for her father's treatment. And she'd win. She'd do anything for it. She'd rehearse from morning till night. She'd prepare. She'd find her niche. She'd figure out how to stand out from the competition. She needed that money desperately. They needed the consent of Kate's guardians to participate in the project. Brooke was stalling again, and Kate understood perfectly well why. It was a matter of banal jealousy. Her stepdaughter's success was like a bone in her throat, an unnecessary reminder that her own daughter had achieved nothing. Molly studied poorly at school, constantly skipped classes, and wasn't distinguished by any talents. Molly's only achievement was her good looks. Brooke explained her reluctance to sign the contract with righteous reasons. "How can I let the girl go there alone? How will I explain all this to your father, who entrusted you to me?" Tallulah explained to Brooke that she would go with Kate. She only needed a power of attorney. She promised to keep an eye on the girl, to support her in everything, to look after her. The stepmother remained adamant. In the end, the teacher had to bribe Brooke. She gave her all her savings, the money she was saving for Kate's father's treatment that she hadn't yet transferred to his account. Brooke couldn't resist this sum and signed everything needed. Kate went to the capital. Tallulah, as promised, was there for her, having taken a long vacation at her own expense. Kate understood that they both had bet everything on her victory, and she tried very hard. The girl worked from morning till night, rehearsing, practicing her voice, and working independently with teachers. Both vocal teachers and choreographers praised her, noting the young student's talent and ability. "Such children always break through," nodded the experienced, a famous singer who had mentored more than one pop star. Kate was unspeakably glad that this woman had become her mentor. Kate won first prize. She had a premonition of victory in advance, yet when the host announced the winners, her hands were sweating, her whole body trembling. Then her name was called from the stage. The audience applauded. Kate, as they had been taught before the final shoot, went to the presenter and cried. Tears streamed down her face, but the cameramen seemed delighted. Live emotions on camera. The presenter asked the winner how she planned to use her winnings. Kate answered honestly, "Now I'll cure my daddy." The audience applauded again. Many viewers wiped away tears. The cameraman eagerly captured these touching moments. After the program aired, people came forward to pay not only for Kate's father's operation, but also for his rehabilitation. They even organised everything from transportation to and from the special medical centre to the purchase of necessary medicine and equipment. When Kate and Tallulah returned to their hometown, they discovered that everything had already been arranged for them. Someone powerful had been touched by the talented girl's story. The identity of these rich, influential people, who couldn't remain indifferent to Kate's misfortune, remained a mystery. It was comforting to know that such wealthy, successful, and kind people existed in the world. Tallulah returned to work, but Kate's life changed completely. She now had famous mentors who guided her, both during her trips to the capital and when she lived at home. Classes continued online with the country's best teachers. The girl grew quickly, absorbing valuable knowledge and skills like a sponge. Kate no longer worked at the restaurant. There simply wasn't time. As she still needed to study at school, Brooke looked at her stepdaughter with undisguised envy. With barbed words and exorbitant household duties, the stepmother did everything to poison Kate's existence, short of unlawful actions, of course. Eventually, Kate went to live with Tallulah. Her father signed his consent. After the operation, he recovered quickly and was already managing his hands quite well. They were moving forward again. Whenever she visited the capital, Kate saw her father. She noticed his progress, happy that he could walk, even if still with a cane. A couple of months ago, this had seemed impossible. But now the doctors gave encouraging predictions. Full recovery was just a matter of time. "I'm proud of you," her father often said, looking admiringly at his daughter. "To think of it, your talent and courage saved me and changed our lives." "Don't forget Tallulah. She saved you too." "Of course. If it weren't for Tallulah's support, none of this would have happened." Tallulah couldn't get away often. It's not easy for a teacher to leave work in the middle of the school year. Still, being the long New Year's vacation, she dashed out to the capital. And she never returned from there. What Kate secretly guessed and wished for had happened. Her father and Tallulah decided they wanted to be together. The couple rented an apartment there, found a job and started a new life. Kate loved returning home from tours. She enjoyed seeing her family and favourite faces, feeling missed. She missed them too, her father and Tallulah. The girl opened the door with her key. She had already turned 22. Kate could easily buy herself a separate apartment. She had the money for it, earning enough now. But here, with her father and Tallulah, she felt so cosy and warm that she didn't want to go anywhere else. Her father worked again, driving a bus. They lived together in a beautiful apartment. Tallulah wasn't working at the school yet, but tutored, planning her lesson schedule herself. This was the only possible option because in Tallulah's arms was year-old Tommy. Kate's little half-brother. The girl was overjoyed at his arrival, and her father was incredibly proud and happy. But how could it be otherwise? He had a grown-up, successful daughter, and now a son had appeared. Brooke was a thing of the past. She lived in Kate's father's old apartment. He hadn't evicted her, but hadn't transferred ownership to her and Molly either. At least, not yet. They divorced almost immediately after her father moved out. The man had finally realized everything, experiencing an epiphany. The accident and serious illness had revealed everyone's true colours. As they say, there's no bad luck that doesn't bring some good. Kate adored little Tommy, and he reciprocated his older sister's affection fully. The girl had dreamed of a sibling in childhood, then stopped, resigning herself to the impossibility. But Tommy had appeared and made Kate's life brighter, more pleasant, more amazing. Kate brought the baby gifts from every trip. Now, in her backpack was a box with a toy railroad, something the child should like. Kate herself looked forward to playing with Tommy. The little boy had become her guide to the wonderful world of childhood, a road Kate had long considered closed to her. The girl tried to enter the apartment silently. It was still early. She didn't want to wake anyone. But as it turned out, no one was asleep. Her father, passionately telling his wife about something, was frying pancakes in the kitchen. Tallulah was whipping something with a blender in a glass bowl. Tommy was there with everyone. He was the first to notice Kate appearing in the doorway and smiled happily at her.